Evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Yountville Town Council meeting for May 1st, 2012. For those of you that are new or infrequent visitors to town, we have staff reports to your right along the wall there, and also I do ask if you would please, as I will be an example here, please turn off your cell phones so unless you're part of our public safety team, just because we do get feedback with our audio equipment, so I appreciate that. With that, I'll ask our town clerk to call the roll, please.
Councilmember Hall.
Here.
Councilmember Moeller.
Here.
Councilmember Dornbecker.
Here.
Mayor Dunbar.
Here.
Let the record reflect that Vice Mayor Chilton is excused and expected to arrive later.
Thank you very much. With that, if I could ask our new sheriff, John Robertson, if he could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, so please join us and stand. Thank you, Sheriff. Move on to the next item on our agenda tonight, which is a closed session report. I believe we do not have a closed session, nor do we have a town attorney to tell us that right now.
Well, let me clarify. You have no reportable action from your last closed session, so that is your closed session report, and you do have closed session yet tonight.
Yes. Thank you very much. Acting town attorney spokesperson. Let's move on now to the adoption of tonight's agenda. Are there any corrections or changes to the agenda? If not, is there a motion to adopt?
I move that we adopt the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Next up, we're going to move on to public comment. This is a time when anyone from the public would like to bring up anything that we're not already going to be speaking about on tonight's agenda. And I know we do have a couple things in particular. So if I could first invite Sergeant Keith Belmar to introduce our special guest this evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very proud to introduce our new sheriff, John Robertson, and our new undersheriff, Brian Banducci.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for allowing us to speak during public comment. The Board of Supervisors on April 6th appointed me to serve the remaining couple of years of Sheriff Coford's term, and that job started on the 16th. And I just wanted to introduce you to me, if you don't already know me, and also introduce you to Under Sheriff Brian Banducci, who I asked to
invite you to come on, just so folks at home that are watching can see you as well.
Sure. Folks at home.
That's right.
Brian has been with the Sheriff's Department for 30 years. He worked as the contract police chief for Napa State Hospital for a couple of years, and then he was down working as the chief in American Canyon for 5 years. So he brings a wealth of experience of working with councils, working with the city managers or town manager in this case. Anyway, I just wanted to explain to you how my career path, I was a police officer down in the Bay Area, and I did a ride-along with a deputy up here in Napa County about 21 years ago. And that ride-along, I came from a mid-sized city. But that ride-along consisted of driving around Yountville. And I pretty much fell in love with Yountville at that point, and I accepted a job or a lateral transfer with the Napa County Sheriff's Office because I was looking for a community policing type environment, and that's when community policing was really big, and it's something that we've kind of jumped into with both feet at the Napa County Sheriff's Office. And this town has given us numerous opportunities, and I was fortunate enough to be assigned here before we had sergeants and we had a deputy. And my office was actually back there in a map closet, which it was a big move for me. But I actually, after a year or two being here, I got to move to the Greyhound bus station over at the vet's home because the Greyhound ticket agents stopped working there. So unfortunately, I didn't really get to go to the nice office on the golf course or the beautiful office that's in downtown here, but I really appreciate you guys taken care of our department. You've given us a platform where we can train people to manage and work in just a wonderful community. And we've had a lot of people move up. Also, we have Cal in the back there, who, when I first started, Cal and I worked day shift together and drove around, and Cal loves being in this town. So anyway, I just wanted to thank you all for allowing us to continue with our community policing model. We're not going to give it up, even in these economic times when the cities are going back to targeted policing and things like that. We're still moving forward with whatever we can do. But we also enjoy working with Steve a lot, and are expecting to do some emergency planning here in the next couple of months. So,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you. Under Sheriff, would you like to say anything? Or?
I just will voice the same thing the sheriff said. Looking forward to it, and I think we'll continue with everything we've done. So,
Great. Thank you very
Thanks
much.
for the
Congratulations and welcome again. We're all extremely pleased with the support we get from both our Sheriff's Department and CAL FIRE. And they're not even here for me to say that, but really appreciate the long history of support and look forward to it continuing for a long time.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. With that, we're going to move on to another anticipated public comment. Actually, I'll invite our Public Works Director, Graham, to introduce our next public comment.
Okay. As you probably saw, there was some PG&E work on Washington Street yesterday and last night. Justin Real is here. He's our government relations representative from PG&E. Justin and I communicate about monthly, talk about projects, whether it's a regulator pit or the streetlight project that PG&E really came through for us on to get that done before the Festival of Lights. So there's quite a bit of PG&E work in town. They get quite a few encroachment permits. They were also a sponsor of Festival of Lights this last year. And they're also gave the town a grant for the methane capture project at the treatment plant. So we have a good working relationship. Sometimes there's projects that are emergencies, and that's what he's here to talk to us about.
And I appreciate you coming because I know it was of great concern to our community what was going on our main street right in the middle of town. So welcome, Justin.
And thank you for having me. I first just wanted to update the council. We've been in clear communication with Public Works, and it's been fantastic. On Friday, the 27th, we found a grade 2 leak right on Washington Street, and we self-identified that leak in terms of us going out and doing our own surveys. After finding that grade 2 leak, we determined that we wanted to start work, but we did not want to start work during the weekend. And the issue being is that we didn't want to impact the town and the downtown centers. And so we started work yesterday. Upon us starting work, we noticed that we were going to have to do some additional work into the evening hours. And I think that's kind of how the town really got impacted in the sense of us having to close down all of Washington Street. Moving forward, though, we did repair the leak. We did go a little bit past the evening hours in the estimated time that we gave the town. And I just wanted to, come here and first address the issue and answer any questions or concerns that you may have. But in a sense, we did find the leak. We addressed the leak. It was a minor leak, but in the sense, in PG&E terms, minor leak is still a leak, and we're going to address it as soon as possible. So
could you give us an update on what the next steps are? I know there was, we see clearly that the condition is, you had to tear up some landscaping, the street, do some temporary repaving. So what is the schedule for finishing up that site?
I cannot give a schedule. I know that our folks are going to be meeting with Public Works tomorrow and to actually go over that exact schedule and to really find a time frame that works best for the town and PG&E in terms of scheduling. But very likely that's going to be a contractor to do the paving work, and that's the remaining part of the work is just to do paving in a sense.
Okay. And so the safety issue has been dealt with. There's no concern about leakage or public safety.
Correct. And even at the time of the leak, there was no concern from a public safety other than from a traffic control standpoint. This was found on a transmission line that's very right adjacent, approximately actually 2 feet from the distribution line. When we first went out and did the leak survey, we thought it was a distribution line. Then doing more leak surveys, we found that it was actually on the transmission line, which operates at a maximum pressure of 150 psi.
Okay. And I'm not sure if maybe town staff could elaborate on this answer, but we did hear some concern about how traffic diversion was handled and what directions people were being led into and out of. And could you speak to what happened there, and also if there's going to be additional street closures?
I do anticipate there very likely will have to be a street closure when the paving happens, and I think that's something that we'll certainly work with Public Works to find the right scheduling on. I think in terms of the traffic issue, we were expecting to be done a lot sooner than obviously 10 o'clock at night. The issue arose is that we actually had to bypass the gas line in the sense of separating the gas line to keep all the customers hot in the town, because the issue is that's the only gas feed for the town, which is a good thing, because the town, in a sense, has its own gas line. But in an issue like that, we had to actually bypass the gas services, which, in a sense, which took an additional 4 hours of work just to make sure that all customers had gas and were not left out of service. So in terms of the traffic plan, though, to answer your question, I do know that we worked with the adjacent restaurant, Hurley, in terms of getting them some signage, and then also working with Public Works. But I'm certainly open to any comments or concerns in terms of us and our traffic plan.
Well, we could probably best work through our town staff with evaluating some of those concerns and working with you, especially as we get into that final repaving stage.
Certainly.
Any other questions or comments from council?
I just
Councilmember
have one
Dornbecker?
question. Mr. Royale, what is your process for alerting the businesses that were going to be impacted?
Generally, in situations where it's planned, we actually send out a letter, and also we do an automated phone call. And in some cases, if the town prefers that way, we'll go and do door-to-door outreach. In a case like this, when we actually run into an emergency, it becomes a lot tougher for us to do that kind of public outreach. And so I do know that there was some door-to-door outreach. Oh, I think I went over my time. I do know that we did do some door-to-door outreach, but in a sense, when you get into an emergency situation like this, it becomes very tough for us to organize automated phone calls and obviously put a letter out in the mail.
I think door-to-door is a good way to handle it. And that was done?
That was done. We did hear some concerns from some of the restaurants that they wanted more additional outreach in terms of, I think they were provided initial outreach. A concern of theirs was they wanted to be updated. And I think that's something at PG&E that we'll work a lot stronger on in terms of getting more real-time info to the customers and also to the residents if houses are near in those cases.
Thank you.
The other thing I wanted to mention to everybody is that PG&E does, just like their electric outage line, they can call I think it's 800-743-5000.
That is correct. We also, even in emergency situations, planned and emergency, we alert our call center as to what's going on so that they have real-time info. And our number is 1-800-743-5000. Say that again for folks at home, 1-800-743-5000. And that's you can speak directly with a representative at PG&E to kind of give you more answers and hopefully provide more real-time info as to what's going on.
Great, thanks. And thanks for your continued cooperation with town staff. I know they've spoken highly of your willingness to communicate, so we appreciate that.
Thank you, and you guys have been a pleasure to work with.
Thanks very much. Don't take this the wrong way, but we hope to not see a lot of you.
I completely understand.
Thank you.
Enjoy your evening.
Thanks. We're going to get just a little less safe right now, it looks like. That's what I mean. All right. We're going to move on now to, oh, yes, I'm sorry. Additional public comment. Thank you for catching me on that one. Yes. Please come join us.
Hi, my name's Debbie Wellborn. This is Phyllis Hunt. She's the president. I'm with Napa Wildlife Rescue Center. I'm a little nervous. Wildlife Rescue Center of Napa County. We're the only organization in Napa County that is permitted to rescue, rehab, and release wildlife back into the wild. It's a wonderful organization. This is Phyllis Hunt. She's our president. But I'm here I know that many people have probably already recognized me. I've gone door to door, and Yountville has been very gracious and in supporting us. And I just wanted to let people that I have not been able to reach, maybe watching TV, to let them know that we're here. We're nonprofit. We also have our baby bird clinic just opened for the second season north of Yountville, right catty corner from Fish and Game. And we rehab and release birds. And we do mammals, birds. We do everything. Wild. Everything wild. We do lots of owls, hawks. We've done coyotes, foxes. But anyway, it's a great organization. I just wanted to thank the town of Yountville and to let those that did not know of us, we are here. We're always looking for more support and for more volunteering.
Volunteers.
Absolutely. Right. And they're
In all capacities.
volunteers are priceless. So thank you, and thanks for allowing us to speak. And
So could you tell us how best to get in touch with you if somebody comes across an animal that needs assistance?
we have brochures. We're going to pass these out to all
You
of
could
you.
go ahead and give them to the town clerk, and she can distribute
There's
those.
some on the table, but we also, like, if anybody should come across a baby bird or an injured or orphaned wildlife animal, that we have a hawk line. It's 224-4295. So that's our hawk line. And Silverado Vet is our drop-off zone. So you can drop it off there, and they work with us. They allow us to have animals dropped off there, and then we pick them up from there and take them into care. We have a core of really dedicated volunteers that's really striving to keep this organization alive. It's and to support the wildlife. Well, that's what we're here for, supporting the wildlife. And it's really awesome. I can't even imagine a world without wildlife because it's pretty entertaining.
I just want to
Yes.
put in a plug for Debbie here because honestly.
Please, if you could just come over to the microphone so
Deb
everyone can hear you.
Deb was almost ruthless in her door-to-door campaign in public awareness and in garnering our funds for our annual campaign, both last year and this year. And I know you have a person on the board that's intimately and has been involved with wildlife rescue. It is honestly an awesome group of volunteers from all over the county, because we do service all of the county. We have been, Yountville has been so supportive, and we do pick up a lot of wildlife in Yountville, and we rehab in Yountville. So there's a great history, I think, with the town and the organization. So we just want to say thank you, and please, if you have
I have one more thing. Our goal, future goal, is to have a site. Eventually, we're hoping to raise enough money to acquire land and build a permanent home for wildlife where we can rehab everything there. So that's our future goal and plans. And thank you. And education. We want to educate. So. Thank you.
I think maybe Councilmember Dornbecker has a question or a comment.
I just wanted to say that my husband is a Thursday afternoon with the baby birds, and this is his second year, and he really enjoys it. It gives him a lot of satisfaction to help out. So, and it was Debbie who came to our door that caused that.
Well, thank you. And I know, and I had such a wonderful time meeting you both and talking with you and seeing your little bluebird
Yes, that's
house
right.
with the camera inside. I thought that was pretty cool. So thank you, each of you, for allowing us to speak.
just like to tell you a short story. Some of you may know this already, but
Please,
the
thank you.
county actually, many people don't realize this, but we do have nesting, not just migratory, but nesting bald and golden eagle. And we were called up last year, not too far away from here, to hopefully rescue a bald eagle. Unfortunately, it had been damaged. It ran into a pole and then a car. It was gone. But just to give you a note of what this organization does, recognizing that it was a bald eagle, the requirement by the federal government is that we ship it back to Washington, D.C. FedEx. So, when you contribute to us, think you might be supporting FedEx as well as the bald eagle.
Well, thank you very much for coming and sharing your work. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And we're going to scoot
Fair enough. Any other members of the public like to speak on anything not on tonight's agenda? No. All right, thank you. Then now we'll move on to presentations. And our first presentation this evening.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Consent calendar.
Did I miss the consent calendar? I sure did.
Too efficient.
I definitely need to use my glasses. Consent calendar, item 7. And I understand that we do have request to pull item 7A, so we might as well just handle these one at a time, since we have 2. So item 7A, Councilmember Moeller, you had requested to pull this item?
Yes, Mayor. I have real property within 500 feet, so I'll need to recuse myself from any voting on this item.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to be had on item 7A?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, what you can do is vote on the consent so that Councilmember Mueller does not have to leave the room. So if you make a motion on the entire consent agenda, then the record can reflect that Councilmember Mueller has not participated in that item.
Fair enough. Is there a motion for approval of the consent calendar?
Motion to approve the consent calendar?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
With the noted abstention.
And I will note that Councilmember Mueller did not participate in item A.
7A. Great. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you very much. I've been really trying to get us to item 8, and we are now going to get to item 8. I'm going to look around the room, make sure I can still do that. Okay.
Very good.
Presentation proclaiming May as Mental Health Awareness Month, and I believe we have Terry Rooney with us, correct? Assistant Clinical Director for Napa County Mental Health Division. And do we also have James here? James from the People Empowering People organization. If you would both please join me up at the podium. Wait for me on this side, and I'll stand on this side, and I definitely have my glasses, so that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. This is a proclamation declaring the month of May as Mental Health Awareness Month. Whereas Mental Health Month provides an excellent public education opportunity to highlight the realities of mental illness in our community and to illustrate the importance of good mental health in the lives of all. And whereas mental health disorders affect all people, regardless of race, age, gender, or social status, and within the next year, at least 1 out of 5 Californians will experience a diagnosable mental illness personally or through a family member. And whereas it is estimated that 887 youth and 1,612 adults living at or below the poverty level in Napa County have a serious emotional disturbance or serious mental illness. And whereas the philosophy of wellness and recovery promotes the belief that individuals can learn to live with their mental illness, improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. And whereas the increasing public awareness about mental illness is vital to fighting the stigma and discrimination that are often barriers to treatment. And whereas Napa County promotes collaboration to support prevention, early intervention, mental health service delivery, and health integration efforts with the goals of fostering recovery from mental illness and improving the health and wellness of our residents. And whereas the mission of the county's mental health division is to responsibly provide mental health services that promote individual strengths, inspire hope, and improve the quality of life for people within Napa County. Now, therefore, I, John F. Dunbar, Mayor of the Town of Yountville, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2012 as Mental Health Awareness Month in the Town of Yountville, with the goal of increasing public awareness, understanding, support, and recognition of the potential for individuals to experience recovery from their mental illness. Signed, John Dunbar, Mayor. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you for receiving this. Would you like to share any comments?
Sure.
Let you sit down. We the people empowering people, PEP at Healthy Humane Services on Old Sonoma Road. We're trying to have a barbecue. You might want to pass this around. You go around this way. Okay. And then we're supposed to have 2 more car washes, and then we're working our way back to go to San Francisco and visiting people. And then we're like a few more people to help us out, so we're trying to get a bigger building up there on Solano up in Napa by Round Table Pizza. And then we appreciate you guys' help and awareness and effort. And then we just want to be more recognizable so we can help people with mentally disabled out more, so they won't have to like isolate themselves, express themselves more so they can help one another out and they can reach their goals and potentials like everybody else, and all of us can learn to get along and everything.
Great.
Just help one another out to make it more of a stronger place.
Great. Well, thank you, James. And just so folks know, let me, if I could, real quickly, just read the Hot Dog Barbecue and Art Show on
sir.
May 9th.
Yes, sir.
At 2261 Elm Street, Trailer N and Building K.
Yes, sir.
From 11 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Yes, sir.
Okay. There you go. If you share that. Thank you very much. And Mr. Rooney, did you want to share any comments as well?
Just on behalf of the Health and Human Services Department and the Division of Mental Health, thank you for your support. And we appreciate we invite the community to participate in many events that are on our website for May is Mental Health Month. There will be a number of opportunities to learn more about mental health services in Napa County.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's our pleasure to have you here tonight.
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Rooney, James, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We're going to move on now to item 8B, a presentation for a proclamation declaring May 6th through the 12th, year 2012, as Public Service Recognition Week. And do we have anyone that's in particular going to receive this, or shall I just read this from? I'll read it from up here.
This is for everybody.
I know.
All the public.
All public service.
We're all special. Yes.
Public servants. This is a proclamation about Public Service Recognition Week, honoring our public servants, connecting citizens with their government. Whereas, since the first week of May 1985, Public Service Recognition Week is time set aside to honor the millions of men and women who serve our nation each and every day as federal, state, county, and local government employees. Whereas Americans are served every single day by government employees, and these unsung heroes do their work that keeps our nation working. Whereas public employees take not only jobs, but an oath to serve the public. Whereas many public servants, including military personnel, police officers, firefighters, Border Patrol officers, embassy employees, and healthcare professionals, are performing emergency response services, and others risk their lives each day in service to the people of the United States and around the world. Whereas public servants include teachers, doctors, and scientists, train conductors and astronauts, nurses and building inspectors, public works maintenance workers, computer technicians and social workers, administrative assistants, accounting technicians, parks and recreation staff, and countless other occupations. Day in and day out, and in times of natural or human disaster, they are called upon to provide the diverse services demanded by the American people of their government at all levels with efficiency and integrity. And whereas without these public servants at every level, continuity would be impossible in a democracy that regularly changes its leaders and elected officials. Whereas this week is designated by Congress as Public Service Recognition Week, and we find ourselves grateful for the opportunity to thank you for all that you do on behalf of our nation. Each and every day, we have the pleasure of witnessing firsthand your remarkable contributions and achievements. Even during these difficult times, you continue working to find innovative solutions to complex issues. Your hard work does not go unnoticed, and we want you to know that we are proud to serve with you. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, John F. Dunbar, Mayor of the Town of Yountville, on behalf of the entire Town Council, do hereby announce and proclaim to all citizens that May 6th through 12th, 2012, is Public Service Recognition Week. All citizens are encouraged to recognize the accomplishments and contributions of government employees at all levels, and especially your town staff that deliver the high quality of services we receive here in the Town of Yountville. And I would say on behalf of the entire Town Council, thanks to all of our employees and public service members that have continued to work with us and for the entire community. So thank you all very much. And if we could pass this over to our town manager, and he could share with the rest of our staff. Thank you very much. Good night. So, not everybody else good night, but we're going to move on now to item 9, our public hearing for this evening. Professional Office Development Incentives, introduction and first reading of ordinance number 404-12. That's item 9A. May we start with the staff report, please?
Thank you. At the April 3rd Town Council meeting, a workshop was held to discuss the provision of incentives to address an unmet need for the professional office use. And before you tonight is a draft ordinance that contains the results of that discussion, the incentives that are contained in the ordinance for the development of professional office space or to encourage the development of professional office space in the commercial zoning districts include a floor area ratio increase, an optional increase to 15% for the development of professional office space. It would be devoted to professional office space exclusively, or it could be used in combination with residential. This is something maybe that wasn't brought out so much in the discussion at the workshop, but it was as long as the 15% that's currently offered for residential incentives or development with mixed use with commercial of residential, as long as that's not exceeded either exclusively by professional office or exclusively by residential or in combination, that is continued to be offered. And this is in addition to the base 25% FAR limitation for commercial. There's no mixing of the two quantities. The addition of use by right for professional office space in the primary commercial and Old Town commercial zoning districts. This is already a provision in residential scale commercial. The potential for flexibility and parking configuration when professional office is developed, which may include tandem parking for use by employees. The consideration here would be that the office is not an office that's open to the public, and the tandem configuration would be used by employees, so there's no confusion there. The last incentive that's offered is a consideration for reduction in front yard setback in commercial zone districts. Currently, a requirement is 15 feet setback. And the evaluation here would be that the reduction in the front setback would be, its relationship is a necessity to assisting and contributing to the provision of professional office space. Then, in addition to those 4 incentives, there's a list of general conditions that most of them are already requirements, either by code or otherwise. A couple of them are guidelines for when this comes up as an incentive and it's invoked, then this provides guidance. The first one is a purpose and intent statement that its purpose is to increase the amount of professional office leasable space. Second one would be that it's they're applicable to leasable professional office space primarily And by leasable, it's meant by uses other than uses that currently would be residing on the property. However, it does leave the opening for consideration by council to approve uses that are already on the site to use that space as well. The third guideline is that, and this is already consistent with the residential overlay and also Old Town commercial requirements that require professional office space to be subordinate to the primary or the commercial uses and retail uses on the site, in the sense that the retail uses occupy street-facing ground level space, and the office space would be subordinate to that and generally occupy a second floor or in back of the retail uses. There's a guideline about basement square footage that if it's generating additional parking, it will be counted for the parking requirement. Also, a precaution against the storage areas that may be placed into attic spaces that are not counted as floors, and the effect they may have on the roof shape as far as a design feature. A reminder that the accessibility requirements per ADA and CalDAG for accessibility to second floors would be invoked and enforced. Generally, this is going to mean in a new building, an elevator to the second floor. And last is the parking requirements for the overall project will not be reduced as a result of the office space incentives, other than the consideration perhaps for, and it's not a reduction, but the configuration of a tandem parking consideration. So those are summarized in the ordinance. That's a draft ordinance that's attached for your consideration. If there's any questions I could answer.
Before public comment, do you have any questions of the staff report? Councilmember Dorbecker?
I do have a question about the, under the supplemental general conditions number 3 that says within a mixed-use commercial development, professional office space uses shall not occupy the first floor ground level and should be subordinated to the, sorry, thank you. That they should be subordinated to the commercial uses. Do we have an ordinance that states that?
We have, in the primary commercial, there's an overlay called the retail overlay, and it does require that. And also in the Old Town at North Washington, Old Town commercial, there is a requirement that the other than retail uses, they're subordinate in that sense that they cannot occupy ground level street facing.
I see. But in the, so there is no area along Washington Street where an office could be just facing the street?
Not in a new development or redeveloped space where there, if there's a master development plan process that's involved in an existing project or in a new development, that would be the case in any event. That would be a requirement that would be imposed,
Okay,
that restriction.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the report before opening the public hearing? Councilmember Mueller?
I just wanted to get your thinking on, you're going to go in after 6 months when somebody leases a space and check things out. When you do that, like what kind of criteria are you going to use? Well, and an additional question while we're on that area is, town staff is going to permit the use after it's qualified by town staff. I want you to kind of tell me what that is. So then also then, once it's approved and somebody goes in and leases the space, what are you going to really be looking for? Is it code enforcement to make sure that these people don't know that they're definitely subordinate to the other use, or that they're following all the California code for how much office space is required per person and ventilation? Just a little more detail on that would be helpful.
Well, to answer the last part of your question, that's going to be up front, built into the consideration at time of approval, the ADA requirements and forget the other one you mentioned, but...
Well, just, I think there's certain building code requirements if you
Right.
have office space
That-
that are different than
that'll
our
happen
commercial.
immediately.
Okay.
And whatever use goes in there, they're bound by those. The subsequent, and I think the other one you mentioned was that it's subordinate to the retail. That's a location on site, so that's built into the master development plan review. When we would subsequently go in and check them later, so to speak, it would be that there's a definition for professional office use that makes it distinct from retail, and we just ensure that it's being continued to be used as that use rather than converted to something else.
Like storage. So you'll be putting a
Storage,
definition
retail,
in?
yeah.
You're putting a definition in for professional office space, what you expect for that, and staff will approve the use based on what they say they might rent to, or?
Yeah. The question started out that, and I ought to clarify that when we went into residential scale commercial and made numerous uses by right to encourage them, and it used to be everything required a use permit, and then there were a list of uses that were amended to be by right in residential scale. The language that's in the ordinance that staff, they first come to staff and we have a look that they are indeed a use by right, that is consistent with the RSC language. We just wanted a quick review before we sign off on something that they're consistent with the intent of being something that would not otherwise be required to have a use permit review.
And also typically on something like that, the town would make a spot check, looking at things like, requiring them to provide a copy of the lease so that we can actually show that the space is leased to somebody as opposed to just saying it. Those are the types of things that we have slowly been implementing and increasing. And the property, when something actually comes forward, you may remember we've been very good about putting in our annual CUP monitoring fee so that the town is reimbursed the cost of monitoring the CUP. So that'll also be something that would be brought forward as part of the standard condition of development at that point in time. But that's what we're looking for, is to ensure that somebody's not using it for other than what the incentive was intended. And there will be an annual spot check.
And the purpose and intent statement may seem like a very obvious thing to state, that the objective of this is, these incentives are to produce professional office space, but later on, if there's a question and they're doing something marginal or other than professional office, it comes right back to this statement that this is how you were able to avail yourselves of these incentives. This is what you're supposed to be doing there. So that's why that's in there.
Okay. I guess because I'm trying to figure out how you're going to handle, it's only 15%, and they can't, and that's, not in addition to the 25% FAR. So I'm getting a sense that anything we probably build out is probably going to be pretty small office space. So if somebody else has a commercial use downstairs and they build the building, I'm not sure restricting them from using that for office space. Or, I don't know, if you have professional office space in just a very small area, you might get kind of into a sticky wicket there about, what's okay and what's not okay, so.
Yeah, what we hope to produce out of this is leasable office space that's distinct from any other use
Right.
that's new. There's a need in the community for that type of square footage. It leaves open, though, the consideration that if they can make their case that they have a need and they're already running a commercial business on the site, that they occupy the space, and it's left open for that consideration and approval. But what we're hoping happens is it's leasable office space to a use that's separate from anything else that's on site.
Because I thought it was going to be totally subordinate and distinct from the commercial use. So I read that incorrectly?
That was discussed at the April meeting, and it was inconclusive, though. So the ordinance left it open for that it can go that way, or can be considered for that use.
Okay. Then I think I understand. Can you just point that out where that is in here? I think I somehow missed it.
You're talking about whether it has to be a completely separate
Right,
use from
yeah.
the primary?
And being left open, I'm okay, because if we get somebody with 200 square feet and they really want to use that as an office space, I'm willing to hear their tale to
Yeah.
see what we want to do. But
That's in the second guideline, guideline number 2.
Wait, guideline number 2. Let me see what we got.
Page 2.
Oh, it's not in the ordinance itself.
No.
That's why I missed it. Okay.
Well, it's in the ordinance, but it's not in the incentives. It's in the guidelines, the
Okay.
general conditions.
The general conditions. Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Hall?
Yeah, Bob, this goes back to sort of my original line of questioning around this, and I'm going to take it a slightly different direction, and that is, I know there's very little space that is unoccupied that could be developed, and obviously this incentive would go towards potentially developing something in those spaces. But just out of curiosity, and this is truly a question of, do you have or do we have need and demand? And I guess my question furthermore to that is that need or demand being expressed by parties that are external, assuming we have this need or demand, and or is it expressed by parties that are internal already to the community of Yountville? And I'm just interested, not necessarily...
I think the answer is threefold. One being, yes, there is no current vacancy, and we have example of the type of people looking for office space. We have some residents that live here that may want an office environment, maybe a 1 or 2 person environment, because they don't want to have the office or the extension of the work that they do out of their house. They want a separation. So we just don't have any space that somebody could physically go rent. We do have, as we're learning, there are some cases that we have some of our successful businesses are growing. And what was sufficient for them when they opened the operation 2-3 years ago is no longer sufficient. Maybe they've added product lines or done something. That's probably driving several. And third, because of that limitation, there are some professional support, things like real estate and others that are being forced out that are really challenged to find space that would like to be in Yountville to serve the Yountville community. So we are very fortunate that we are in a situation where there's interest and demand. What we have in general is a shortage of any leasable space, retail and office being our the two that really just, when it is available and it's priced, it's gone.
Thank you.
The only question I have relates to the language as it defines professional office space. And I guess this goes a little bit to some of the questions about what can be a street frontage, first floor, primary use professional office. And you talk about the ability to have tandem parking because there will basically be employees that arrive, work a day, and leave, and there's little to no public interaction in the office space. How are we defining office space when we do already have things like a dentist, a doctor, a real estate agent that are professionals that work in their offices, but they see public? So is there language that distinguishes from somebody who needs a call center or a fax machine and the privacy of a room? Is that clear?
Right, yeah. Well, medical offices, for instance, can be very high traffic generators and would require, or they would have a parking demand that is quite separate from, we've had contractors' offices, for instance, where nobody ever goes there except the contractor. And it's self-contained, no visits by the public typically. And then along the spectrum, real estate office may be somewhere in the middle. So what's intended in the evaluation, and it's case by case on this tandem parking arrangement, is what type of generation they're going to have. And it's suggested that if it's a type of use that has no customer visits or client visits, that could be considered. And the only people using the tandem spaces would be the employees. Otherwise, if it were a high generator, then it would be that wouldn't be possible or practical.
So am I accurate in saying that these incentives are options that still need to be qualified each individually? And so you are still going to evaluate on a case-by-case basis which of these incentives can apply. There'll be some kind of rough structure, though, or template that if you are, say, a doctor's office, you are going to automatically be disqualified from some of this because of the traffic you generate, where if you're going to be a purely an attorney's office, an architect's office that has little to no visitor traffic, you're going to automatically qualify for some, given other conditions.
I wouldn't say automatically, but
you're still open to qualify for.
Yes.
So very few will likely qualify for all the incentives.
Yes. And really the limiting factor in all this is going to be the parking. The ability to come up with surplus parking for an office use is even greater than the residential 15% incentive. And we kind of talked about that a little at the April meeting. It's going to be how much square footage the office, the driver of that will be the provision of parking.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. This is a public hearing, and I'm going to officially open the public hearing portion of this. So I'd invite, since we don't have an applicant that hasn't already spoken, I'll invite any members of the public that would like to address this issue. Now would be the time. Mr. Warren, would you like to? Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Ed Warren. I'm a resident of Yonkville. I was pleased to hear Mr. Rogers' remarks about the need for, and I confess not to understanding the necessity of the incentives in order to encourage office development in a place where there already is very little space to develop, and so it will soon fill up under any circumstance. But the one question which I wanted to ask that might be considered by the council members as they make a decision is whether or not this incentive in any way competes against the residential incentive and whether or not one is more important than the other in terms of the long-term impact upon the residents, members of Yonkville. So it's a question. I think the report was very balanced and fair and all that.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing your comments. Any other members of the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and return the discussion back to the council. I'll start, Councilmember Mueller, if you have comments about this item.
No, I think I have no issue at all with the new ordinance, and I wish us luck in maybe getting someone to kind of take us up on this and perhaps get some office space here, because I can't imagine it would be needed. So I'm all for it. Get it done.
Thank you. Councilmember Hall?
Yes, I want to say thanks, obviously, for putting the report together. I mean, I know in our last meeting, the discussion around this, I was a little perplexed as to why we might need to add business office space, and then obviously it was brought to my attention that there's a lot of businesses that are being successful and are finding that they're at capacity in their existing space. And certainly we would welcome any applicant and to create or drive this kind of development. Not only would it provide a use or a need that we have lacking in the town, but also to some extent would diversify our business mix, which today I think a lot of residents would communicate and articulate maybe a little heavily laden towards primarily serving the tourists. That being the case, these offices may ultimately also serve them, but from afar. I'm not exactly sure what would come out of it. But, I mean, I do see the drive and the need for that, so it makes sense to me. I didn't ask the question, but I would make the assumption that or if there were applicants to come in to develop professional office space, that there would be some generation of additional business tax, and I'm assuming that that would be managed within our existing master fee schedule of what we would provide every month. Is that not correct?
Well,
I know it's
the
significant.
short answer is yes, if we had a meaningful and purposeful business tax. You have a $20 per business, flat business, so
Immaterial.
it's immaterial.
Great.
But I should point out, some businesses, for example, there could be a catalog sales office and things
Sales
like that,
tax.
or a technology that is generated, and that may actually generate a transaction tax. So I don't want to say that it's, some bizarre things happen sometimes that can have positive impacts, but as far as it having a significant impact on business license revenue, no.
Well, we'll look forward to the $20 a year from the applications and the people that are getting the benefit of the new office space. But I think it's smart. I now have fully understood the direction, and I think the incentives are in line. They're not excessive one way or the other, and I think they're still somewhat open to council interpretation and determination after the applicant is to submit application.
Thank you. Councilmember Dornbecker.
Thank you. I also feel that it's a very good thing to encourage having professional office availability in town. And I wondered when I first read all of this that we were offering, more than one incentive, which I had kind of in my mind that we were just going to offer an additional FAR. But no, hearing you say that, could be one or the other, or there could be, and it's all limited by the number of parking spaces, that gives me some, guidelines that I feel better about, because I didn't realize, and I know I asked this question during our hearing before, how many requests we have had in the last 6 months for office space availability. But I know of one particular business that is probably seeking office space, hopefully, so they move out of the residential home. But anyway, I think that it's, and I don't know what defines the difference between a real estate office, which can have a front on the main street, and another kind of professional office, although it is a sales office, and so maybe that's what makes the difference. But anyway, I think that this is a good thing to have the incentives, and I will depend upon our excellent planning department and director to work out the details with whoever does apply.
No pressure, Bob. I do want to say I appreciate both your and Sandra's, our entire planning department being kind of visionary and proactive about seeing needs developing and trying to establish some criteria and put a structure in place in anticipation of, rather than what we have had to do in some cases in years past, chasing issues that have become a problem and trying to find a solution. So this is really trying to set the ground rules ahead of that. And it also makes it a little more defined for potential applicants. So I appreciate that. That's the only other comment I wanted to share. With that, is there a motion to be had by the council? Staff is recommending an introduction of the ordinance and a waiving of the first reading.
I move that we introduce ordinance number 404-12, an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Yountville, amending the Yountville Municipal Code Title 17, Chapter 17.48, Primary Commercial, and Chapter 17.56, Old Town Commercial, and adding Chapter 18.40.070 to Title 18 in order to establish incentives for the development of professional office space within commercial zoning districts.
Second.
Aren't you glad you didn't have to read the whole thing? All in favor?
Aye.
No opposition. That passes. Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to our first administrative regular item, item 10A, Napa Valley Transportation Authority sales tax proposal, ordinance number 12-01, considering adoption of said resolution. Staff report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm going to attempt to be brief because this is an item that many of you have been involved with, but I am going to, because of the importance, highlight a few of the key elements to make sure everybody is aware of that. Tonight, we're asked to approve a resolution approving the proposed Napa Valley Transportation Authority Transportation Improvement Expenditure Plan to be funded by the extension of an existing Measure A half-cent sales tax. Your action is one of 6 that are necessary for this to proceed forward to be placed on the fall ballot. All of the local jurisdictions and the County Board of Supervisors are being asked to take action on this. To date, the City of Napa and the City of St. Helena have approved it. Tonight, Yountville is considering it, American Canyon is considering it, and Calistoga. And then it will go to the County Board of Supervisors. The proposed measure has been discussed extensively at the NCTPA level, and there was an engaged focus group, a large focus group of potential members of the community, as well as transportation and planning staff and the technical advisor group of the town managers and city managers. The expenditure plan that's being recommended to you by the Board of Directors of the Napa Valley Transportation Agency includes a measure that will allocate 99% of the funds and dedicate them to maintaining and repairing existing streets and roads throughout the county. Limit cost to 1% for administrative support. The measure would be a half-cent sales tax that would begin upon the termination of existing Measure A, the local flood control measure, and that is scheduled on July 1, 2018. The requirement includes that there be an independent oversight committee that will monitor the expenditure and the allocation plans. The revenue allocation from the program is based on countywide sales tax revenue, and it's a percent. Currently estimated funding over the 25-year life of the measure is $282 million in 2011 dollars. The allocations range from the low of 2.7 for Yountville and Calistoga to 39.65 for the County of Napa and 40.35% for the City of Napa. I do think what's noteworthy in the case of Yountville is that this percent is based on total sales tax generated countywide. So as countywide sales tax growth increase, we will see a plateauing in ours at some point in the near future. So there is some positive in the nature of how this particular measure is structured. Just to put it in round numbers, it would generate approximately $304,000 had it been enacted today in 2011. Included in your staff report, and I will not go into great detail, is the council's already seen it and you've approved our transportation, our pavement management, and it shows you where our current PMI or pavement management index rating, and it roughly shares with you, and the council approved as a goal, trying to achieve a standard that basically would require $360,000 a year in 2011 dollars. So long story short, this potentially offers the opportunity to provide a stable funding source earmarked and limited exclusively to the repair and maintenance of local streets. So with that, there's a structure, and the council is being asked to receive the staff report, take public comment, and by motion adopt the resolution. And again, I want to stress that approval of the resolution tonight, your action you're taking is really moving forward to let the public vote on the measure. So with that, I'm available for any questions that you might have.
And I'm going to add one element to this, actually 2 elements to this, and I appreciate the clarification that we're not approving or rejecting the sales tax here. We are just approving or disapproving our support for the NCTPA's effort to put this on the ballot. So let's make sure everybody's clear on that. But two elements. One, the NCTPA Board of Directors has given its general support through discussion. There has not been a formal vote, but just to share that, and I think I did share some details at our last council meeting about our last discussion at the NCTPA level. The one piece to the proposed initiative I wanted to add was the alternative transportation commitment that is being required as the initiative is being written. 6.67% of the revenue generated by the sales tax would then need to be basically matched by all the cities, the town, and the county, and put toward alternative transportation like the countywide bicycle plan. So that was the, it's not taking 6.67% of the 99%, it's the municipality's commitment to generate additional revenue through state and federal grants primarily to fund those alternative transportation measures. Because there was great discussion through the public committee that was reviewing this, that there be a commitment, some kind of funding commitment to alternative transportation. So that's where that came from. So I just wanted to add that to the staff report. With that, are there specific questions about the staff report before I ask for public comment?
Well,
Councilmember Dornbecker?
I didn't have one until you mentioned the alternative, from what I read, it looked like that 6.675% or whatever it was is designated only for the bike path. Is that, or the, bicycle coalition thing, is that true?
I think it's principally the countywide bike plan, but I don't know that it's 100% of the 6.67 committed only to the bike path. I'd have to confirm that in the language.
Okay.
Originally, the discussion was alternative transportation, primarily the bike path, but there were also concerns about safe routes to schools and things like more pedestrian pathway needs, but I don't remember what the specific language was on that.
Mayor, you're correct. In general, it's a broad coalition of packages. It could include senior transportation subsidies, various things like that. The most active focus has been on expanding bike and pedestrian trails, but the intent is that those types of things would be what would be the alternative transportation measure.
And there were two specific grant sources designated to provide that 6.67%. So it's not that each city and the town and the county have to find that funding in their local general fund. It basically is a commitment that we would continue to seek out that grant funding. The concern by some of the public interest groups was that there'd no longer be an incentive for the municipalities to go after that federal money, basically. But the commitment is that we're saying we would continue that effort. It's already been going on, but we would continue that effort so as to not take away some of the money that's dedicated for road repair.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the staff report? If not, I'll invite members of the public to comment on this item if you would like. Mr. Warren, no? Yes, no, maybe? No? Okay. So I see no members of the public joining in the discussion. So with that, let's have the council continue to discuss or potentially act on the staff recommendation before us, which is to give approval and support to this transportation improvement plan. Any further comment or action?
I just have a couple quick comments, and this goes back to what I discussed in the last meeting with regards to this, and just specifically with regards to the regressive nature of a sales tax. And I know that there are certainly needs, and there exists a need with regards to the roads. I just want to echo again that that is a concern I have. I recognize, understand the challenge that we're being faced with keeping the roads in repair, and certainly we benefit as a municipality from having the county roads taken care of. So I can certainly see value in letting this go forward and letting the voters decide, that is, the voters of Napa County decide, and I certainly don't want to be an impediment to that. I would also at least like to make the comment, and I think it's important because I worry that when we put these things in place, not unlike any of the other taxes that get put on to the voters, which they will have the final say on, that 25 years is a long time, and people will have very short-term memories about having voted on it 5, 10, 15 years from now, and we will continue to be paying it. That said, in Napa County, I trust that the continued bolus of the sales tax is coming from those that are using the roads and will be spending the money as they come into our county, and that fortunately sales tax doesn't go to those normal or common goods that people use whenever they are out trying to feed themselves, house themselves, or keep water and utilities. But it is a regressive tax, but it appears that it's going to be a necessary evil. I'm stunned by the time, but let's let the voters decide upon that.
Any other discussion, Councilmember Mueller?
My comments are similar to what I've made in the past too. My major concerns are, one, we're asking the voters this November to approve this, but yet there's this 6-year delay. And, granted, I have to, look up these numbers all the time. Like, when's Measure A expiring? I have to look it up. I should be able to remember it. But, asking the voters to oh, don't worry, 6 years from now, then we're going to get going. That's what you voted on. I just think it's not straightforward, and I don't really like that part. I really don't like the 25-year length. This is going to sunset, and let's see if my math is right, 2043. I mean, I can't even think that far out. It's just a long way out. And I just don't think that we've really put enough, thought into this. I know there's a lot of different interest groups out there that there has to be a lot of work getting them on board, but I think it hasn't really gone far enough. I'm kind of calling this today kind of a dinosaur way of taxation. There are no incentives in this plan at all. We are now, with many of the ways that we raise rates or put taxes on, we allow for those types of incentives to, we need a way to really decrease the number of people that are on the road driving. We call that our vehicle miles traveled all the time. We're always trying to decrease that, but this tax certainly doesn't go anywhere near that. And, we do that with our electricity, our water, our garbage. We're always putting incentives on. And I really didn't see any kind of discussion about that at all when it was kind of going through. And I think there are ways. I don't know if I can tell you what they are, but I can tell you in 25 years, looking at technology 25 years in the rear, we're going to have that technology. And this just doesn't allow for any of that might be coming up. And it will. I think, there are already new cars, they're putting these transponders and new computers on. They're going to monitor lots of things. They can easily monitor vehicles' mile travel and put a tax on. So I think that this length is just, it's an old-fashioned way of doing things, and we're not allowing for, any new technology that might be coming up. But ultimately, I do agree that the voters are really going to have the ultimate say. We're going to put it out there. And if they ultimately decide that, yes, we really need this, and I'm going to believe that the government's going to spend my money wisely, then they're going to approve it. And if they don't, then we won't have it. But to keep, and I hope that if it does get approved, that we can figure out a way to let everyone know in 6 years we're going to get going on this. But if it doesn't get approved, I think it's important to listen to the voters. And as we sit on these boards, not to just keep floating it out year after year, trying to wear them down, but really listen to what they're saying and try to make adjustments.
Thank you. Councilmember Nordenbecker, any discussion?
Well, ultimately, it is going to be the voters who decide. And as I mentioned when we talked about this before, I know that 25 years is a long time, but to have steady resource of funding to keep the roads better. And, I don't think that in the Napa Valley, traveling by road, I think it's fundamental. And all of the visitors who come here use the roads, and they will be participating with their dollars to help keep the roads. And in a way, that's the incentive I see, is that Highway 29 right now is really terrible. I mean, I have to really watch where I'm going and try and miss the potholes. And I think to have those roads, taken care of and maintained will enhance the Napa Valley for the residents and the visitors. And ultimately, the voters may disagree, and they may not vote for it. And I do agree with Council Member Moeller that, then we should listen to what they say. But a lot of people really care about driving on the roads. So I can support this because I know that ultimately the people will decide with their votes.
Thank you. And I'll just reiterate some of the comments that either I've shared here or have heard in the NCTPA board discussions. There was a clear message sent by all the polling that was done with the public as well as the stakeholder groups that this needed to be an explicit and very simple initiative or it would not pass. Many iterations ago, there were many other concerns included in this initiative. They dealt with some of the things that I think you were addressing, an example being alternative modes of transportation and other commitments outside of road repair. Congestion relief was one of those. Through all the polling, the numbers were saying the county would not support a cumbersome, kind of multifaceted tax measure because people just don't have the confidence that those tax dollars would go where they're told they're going. So they said, simplify it. That's why they got to 99% is committed to nothing more than road repair. It's pretty easy to monitor that. All of the community leaders agreed every single municipality and the county needs funding support for road repair. We need funding for other things as well, but fundamentally road repair is critical. It's also, I think, recognizing that the state and the federal government are not going to be supporting local road repair like they have in the past, and there's no expectation in the future. And I think that's also one of the reasons that they were looking at a 25-year sunset. Something very similar to what we're looking at with the flood control. They also spoke many times about postponing the implementation of a tax so there was not an additional tax on the people. It's waiting until the flood control measure sunsets so that basically that funding would be replaced by the transportation initiative. So there'd be a zero net gain in taxation. So those are some of the reasons behind it. Again, as we've all stated, assuming this does get approval and is put on the ballot for November, then the voters will decide. But I do think it's important for us to support putting this forward to a formal vote by the NCTPA and then letting the residents of the county make the ultimate decision. So with that, is there a motion for action?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 3019-12, approving the proposed Napa Valley Transportation Authority, NVTA, transportation improvement expenditure plan to be funded by extension of existing Measure A half-cent sales tax for purposes of funding local streets and roads maintenance.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No opposition. That passes. Thank you. Next up, we're going to start talking about recycled water again. It seems like it's been weeks since we've talked about this. But item 10B, state-mandated recycled water expansion project. We are being asked to consider adoption of resolution number 3020-12. Can we start with the staff report?
Yes. Good evening, Mayor Dunbar, Town Council. You're correct. We are back talking about recycled water, and I think you recognize some of the faces in the audience for our presentation tonight. Start. Should kick over in a second. Technical difficulties. Okay, here we go. So I want to give you a little background of this project's been going a little while. The town is required to expand the recycled water system as part of our permit for the wastewater treatment plant. The recycled water expenses are incurred where actually, when the town council adopted the new rates, include funding for such a $3.2 million project, which assumed a 25% grant from the federal government. The recycled water sales revenue that's been collected over the past few years is about $30,000 a year from the sale of the recycled water, so it's far less than the cost for treating and distributing that water. GHD and Bartle Wells was hired to do a feasibility study, preliminary design, environmental document, rate study. This is all part of the process to apply for financing from the state and a loan from the federal government. And then there was a stakeholder meeting with the recycled water customers and potential customers on August 26th. We'll talk to you about that. And then the draft rate study was presented to the council on the 21st. So we want to give you follow-up from your comments at the last meeting and from the stakeholder meeting. So just to get people oriented again on our water and wastewater system, Rector Reservoir is up in the hills east of Silverado Trail, north of Yountville Crossroad. The water comes across Yountville Crossroad through town up to the Veterans Home. The town taps into that water and then distributes in town. The wastewater drains to the pump station at the southeast corner of town. It's pumped up to the treatment plant at the Veterans Home. It's treated to tertiary level of treatment, which is the one of the highest levels, which allows it to have multiple uses. From there, there's a pipeline that goes across the valley. This is Silverado West, their pond for frost control and irrigation of their vineyards. This is Herrick Ranch. There's another round pond. Then it crosses the Napa River. There's a pond here at Mondavi. Goes around the hill. It's along Silverado Trail. There's Stag's Leap. And then also Ragusi. And then at the far end is Clos d'Aval. Chimney Rock is also Ragusi. So these are existing customers on the east side of the river since 1977. Because the pipeline goes past Silverado Vineyards and Herrick Ranch, and then over here is Behringer, what's been studied is how much would it take to connect these three ponds to the existing recycled water system. So that's been the effort so far, and part of that effort was to look at the rates of what the town should be charging, one, to build the project, and two, deliver that. So with that, I'd like to invite Doug Dove to come up and continue our presentation.
Thank you, Graham, and good evening. It's a pleasure to be back. It's been over 2 months since we were here at last. Before you, we did have a meeting on March 23rd with the vineyard managers, but we'll get to that. I'd just like to present an update of what's occurred since our last presentation before you. Oops, what's going on? Can you advance that? Oh, I'm sorry. That's good. Okay.
Council or?
This is perfect. Okay. So we've gotten confirmation from the regional board that the lowest cost project does meet the requirements of your permit. You need a minimum of 2 new recycled water customers to be added to your system. So that's new since last meeting. And February 21st meeting, you directed that you didn't really want to spend $11.7 million on recycled water. It's pretty unaffordable, and ratepayers would really have to pick up a lot of that cost. So we're not going to pursue the $11.7 million alternative. Wanted to develop a rate structure that had incentives to incentivizes new customers, but also helps minimize the cost to wastewater ratepayers. And renegotiate the recycled water customer user agreements to be consistent and fair to all users. Right now we've got a whole bunch of separate agreements with all different terms, so I'm going to set those up to be uniform. And also evaluate a land disposal, basically spreading recycled water on a field instead of pumping it all over to different wineries. Would that be cheaper? So we looked into that as well. Next slide. Go ahead. So we had a stakeholders meeting on March 23rd, and we had representatives of 6 vineyards and wineries, and it was a very constructive meeting and very positive and cordial. And, this is really a partnership between the town and the vineyards. And there was, a lot of discussion about different alternatives and the rates. And ultimately, we did come away with some direction on the rates. And, it's just a wonderful relationship that town staff has with the vineyards. And I was very impressed with that. So it's a win-win situation, and we want to continue that. There's the real value of the recycled water is its reliability. You don't have to worry about droughts. It's a very secure source of water, and that's very attractive to vineyards. Potential new customers on the west side of the Napa River, they have alternate water supplies, and really, would be most interested in purchasing water during the peak season, which has the Tier 1 customers, your current customers, have a priority on that. And the Tier 1 customers indicated that they were willing to be flexible and consider, working out an arrangement where some water could be sold during the peak season to some of these other vineyards. And possibly those Tier 1 customers could possibly take some more water during the off-peak season to allow some to be available during the peak. So it was just a very positive working group there, and that was a good meeting. So we talked about optimizing the use of the recycled water, and Don Moore really has a great relationship with the vineyards, and they, when they need water, they call up and he makes sure they get it, and when the town needs to get rid of water, he calls them and they take it, and so it's a great situation right now. So we were proposing a uniform rate structure with a monthly meter charge for capital costs like system replacement, and a consumption charge for operations and maintenance. And essentially, we're trying to recover the cost of pumping the treated water up to over to the vineyards for their irrigation. The cost of the treatment of the water at the wastewater treatment plant is covered by the wastewater customers. So the goal is to recover the cost of the recycled water system, and to provide an incentive for purchasing the water in the wintertime, in the off-peak. We came up with a consumption charge of 50% of the peak charge. And so just in summary again, your Tier 1 customers, Vintners Golf Club, Chimney Rock, Clos Duval, and Stag's Leap, and they have the priority during June through October for the water. And then the Tier 2 customers and potential customers, Beringer, Herrick Ranch, Mondavi, which is currently taking some water, and Silverado East and West. And the off-peak season is November 1st through May 31st. So we're currently in the off-peak right now, but almost into the peak season. Next slide, please. So again, there were 4 options were being reviewed for the project. The base project was $3.2 million. And that would serve a total of 7 recycled water customers. Option 2 was a little more expensive at $4.3 million, and that would serve up to 8 customers. And then the $11.7 million option, option 3, could serve 8 or more customers. But again, it's extremely expensive. So we also looked at this 4th option, which was the minimum project, which expands the system to provide water to 2 new wineries, Silverado West and Herrick Ranch, but also has the lowest cost, so that has the least impact on your wastewater rates. It should be noted that if Silverado West or Herrick Ranch decline to participate in the recycled water system, then we would have to extend to Beringer at a slightly higher cost of $2.7 million. So this is just a little schematic of your system. The blue pipes are the existing system, and there's a bunch of storage there. We really want to be able to fill up that storage in the off-peak season with recycled water so that we can reuse as much of this resource as possible. The red pipelines are potential new lines and under the various alternatives. Briefly, the land application alternative. We looked at what it would take to just spread this effluent on some land near the treatment plant. We would need 130 acre-foot of storage, and we'd also have to purchase land for 48 acres, plus 20 acres for storage ponds. And we would have distribution piping to the storage pond of approximately 2,900 lineal feet, plus the infrastructure for land application over the 48 acres of pasture land. So this one did not pencil out. It's over $10 million. And, think about it. If you're going to purchase land and construct an irrigation system and run the irrigation system, it's going to be more expensive, especially here, land's very expensive, than having the water just delivered to vineyards where they actually irrigate and do take care of it themselves.
And already have ponds.
Yeah, they already have ponds, and so that didn't pencil out. So the recycled rate components, as I mentioned, there's a fixed charge and a variable charge. The fixed charge is a monthly, and that recovers costs related to capital and annual repairs and replacements and debt service for the expansion project, although that cost is spread over all your wastewater ratepayers as well as the recycled water. The variable charge is set to recover costs that vary, and that's the pumping cost for pumping the treated water to the vineyards. And so the total charge includes the fixed charge plus the variable charge. And the way these worked out, alternatives 2 and 3, because of the cost, were not supported by your existing wastewater rates. But alternative 1, the $3.2 million, was built into the rate study for the wastewater rates that were approved about a year and a half ago. And so option 4, you can see the impact on wastewater customers is about $11 less under alternative 4 than under alternative 1. So it's a significant amount that will take pressure off of your wastewater rates. So it's good savings for the ratepayer. On the recycled water customers, alternative 1, even though it's more expensive, has a slightly lower meter charge of $207 a month. That's because there's more users than alternative 4, which would have a $227 a month meter charge. The consumption charges for the peak season, it's $161 an acre foot, and that's the cost of pumping the water from the effluent pond at the treatment plant to the vineyards. $161 an acre foot. In the off-peak, we wouldn't quite be recovering our cost on that, so that would be at 50% of the peak rate of $80, so it would be $80 an acre foot. Next slide. So in summary, wastewater funds are used to pay for the construction of the expansion project. We're pursuing the lowest cost funding options, which is 25% USBR grant and a 75% state revolving fund loan. We're recommending one rate structure for existing and potential customers based on seasonal demand. Tier 1 customers may make some recycled water available to other customers during the peak season, and they've been very good about working with the town and with the community. Consumption charge during the off-peak season is 50% of the peak, and annual increases to both the fixed and consumption charges will increase based on the change in the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index. That's a standard index that we use in the utility industry. So that would just gradually increase the rates year over year to, cost of living type increases. So the next steps are to solicit the buy-in from the Tier 2 customers and select the expansion project, complete the environmental study, and approve the recycled water rates, and then renegotiate the user agreements. So with that, open it up for questions.
Great, thank you. Are there questions about the staff report, either of our presenter or our Public Works Director? Councilmember Dornbecker.
I just want to confirm for my own information, as I was reading through this, it does say that that the rate structure of Alternative 4, even though it's greater than Alternative 1, they would still be within the limits of the existing rate structure. Does that mean we do not have to charge $19.89 extra per month? We don't have to raise our wastewater rates. Is that true?
Right. We have a phased increase in steps over a number of years. So by selecting this lower cost alternative, that will take some of the increase out of the expenses at least. So
if I could, just to be real clear, Alternative 1 and Alternative 4 can be achieved within your approved 5-year rate. Alternative 2 and 3 would require an additional rate increase above the 5-year rate. So that's why staff is really focusing on Alternative 4 and Alternative 1 as a backup. But very good question to make sure we get that clarified.
Other questions about the staff report? Councilmember Moeller.
I have a question that you probably can't answer, so can you just guess for me?
Okay.
We're doing all this because of the new NPEDS, or however you say the acronym. I don't.
NPEDS.
NPDES permit.
PDES.
So, the way I'm looking at this, because we've had to do this in the past when we first initiated it, we're having to do it again. It's almost like ABAG housing allotment numbers or something here. So, you have any sense? Have you heard any rumors on the street when we're going to get hit with adding 2 more, 4 more customers?
Yeah, every time you update your permit, probably, whether is it a 5-year process or 10-year process?
Yeah, it's a 5-year permit. What's been happening, and Ted Whitten is also here from GHD, went to the Water Reuse Conference, and the State Water Resource Control Board is trying to promote more recycled water, especially water that's coming out of the Delta, going to Southern California, because there is no new source of water. So what they're encouraging is all agencies to use recycled water. And the federal government, through the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, is funding millions and millions of dollars to construct systems so that they're not using water out of reservoirs or wells, but recycling water, which then reduces the demand. The way the permit's written is the key word, apparently, from what our conversation with our permit handler is encourage. So the regional board is not forcing us to essentially recycle water, and we're already recycling. But so we anticipate that there's nothing on the horizon that says, okay, well now they're going to change it in 5 years to say it's required. So that at this point, looking out 5 to 10 years, it doesn't appear that there's going to be any new mandates that's going to go beyond just encouraging agencies to do recycling water. And I don't know if Ted had anything else. Okay.
And if I could expand on that, we also have to remember that our system is one that was built. We made a decision at a point in time to dispose of the treated effluent in this manner. There are some entities that were using what we call the hayfield alternative. For example, they would have bought the property, been operating in that type of in many cases, those folks are also now being forced with how to recycle water. We're already doing a level, so I think it's a good question because, there always seems to be a new regulatory permit condition imposed. But I think these efforts are going to get us much closer to a threshold where it's hard to be able, to go and say, what more can we do? Because we're doing this, we're, producing X, recycling close to X. We just need a little capacity in the peak winter flow. So I think our situation is different than some some others where they're being basically forced to move away from the hayfield or other venue and develop an infrastructure. We were asked to improve our from 60% to getting closer to 80%, if you will, on a more consistent basis. But I'm not going to say that we'll never know exactly what will come out of a regulatory permit condition 10 years, 15 years from now.
Yeah, the permit issue that is the biggest concern, and it has been since 1977 when the whole system was set up, was not discharging effluent, even though it's highly treated, to the Napa River during the dry months when there's not a lot of water running off the hills into the river. So they're concerned about, how much water. So there's always going to be that concern of, between May and October or so, they're not going to want effluent going into the Napa River. So we're going to continue to need to, have recycled water customers. Now the question is, okay, well, are they going to extend that to April to, November? So does that window get, expanded? So they may ratchet it down that way, sort of saying, okay, well, we're not going to let you discharge during these months, which is more months, and so we may have to recycle more. But by having the expansion with more customers, then it allows us a little more flexibility to have that water in storage more places. And then by having the two rates, then we're also trying to encourage customers to take the recycled water during those shoulder months in spring and fall to recycle when they haven't been really doing that as much in the past.
I have one more question. Yes. So our wastewater and our water, these are closed enterprise funds. So I certainly recognize that this wastewater is generated by the residents of Yountville, but I also see that there is a benefit to the county residents. And, we're charging them some for that. But where I'm getting to is that these are business property owners in the county of Napa, and they pay the county a lot of taxes. So, why, since these are closed funds, is there any way that we could, ask the county, hey, they're not afraid about putting their hand in our little cookie jar, when it comes to the animal shelter or, the library, things like that. Being a closed enterprise fund, if we asked and they were agreed to help us build these pipelines out to their county businesses that pay taxes to them, could we deposit that into these enterprise funds? There's a lot of ifs.
Yes, you have a lot of ifs. Some would call it a fairy tale.
Well, it's...
I would tell you, one, if somebody wanted to give us a donation towards the project, whether it's the county or the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, we'd take it. The short answer is there's no legal nexus for a utility enterprise fund because the county is not necessarily the recipient of the benefit, even though it does support. What I will share with you is our efforts take a leadership role in supporting the county's longstanding water use policies, but does that make them say that they would support financially? I'm willing, we can ask, but I think I know what the answer is going to be, which is no. I mean, they have some problems of their own with a few of their own utility districts and managing monitoring and managing the production and waste disposal for the unincorporated county. I do think our best efforts right now are to continue. We've developed a positive working relationship with both the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and the State Revolving Fund, and I think we stand very good chances to get a continuation of a 25% grant, and hopefully will be looked at favorably for a low-interest State Revolving Fund. I wish I could figure out a way to get the county to have to pony up, but I honestly can't see one. I'll continue to chew on that one a little bit, but I just don't see a good nexus.
Well, let me also add on that, these are businesses, and they're making business decisions, and so they can pump water out of the ground, they can pump water out of the river. We're not in a situation like in Irvine or Orange County or somewhere where they sell the water to these businesses. And they say, okay, well, if you want to buy water and you want to connect to our system, then you need to buy recycled water at 90% of the rate. I mean, they're charging $1,500 an acre foot in Southern California, and we're just, our mouths are dropping, saying, how can you do that? And they look at us and they say, well, how come you're charging so little? It's just because of supply and demand, and they can get water less expensively by pumping out of the river or out of the ground. There are times in the year when they can't pump out of the river because it is too dry, or certain drought years. So they are looking for the reliability with us, and so they're willing to buy the water during the wet years, so they'll have water to buy during the dry years. And so that's where they're looking at it in terms of, we're selling it and they're buying it, and what's a negotiated price that we can agree on. I think that's where Doug was talking about in our stakeholder meeting, how they proposed half price during the shoulder season. And it's sure we're still subsidizing a bit, but it gets our system in place, our pipeline, so that we can sell them recycled water to store in their ponds, which, they took the expense to build the ponds too. I mean, that's an expense the town hasn't had to make to build tanks or ponds or things like that. So that's sort of where we're looking at the dollars and cents, and I don't know if you have anything else to add on that.
One other footnote I would, though, is the regulatory agencies may make it more onerous and more expensive for some of the agricultural uses to pull out of the river. So in some point in time, we may end up being still a more viable alternative, which may improve our ability to charge more, if you will. But right now, since they have that tool and it's not something that they're limited on, they have to weigh it. And if it's too more expensive, then they're not going to take it.
But it's really the cost of the pipes that is really where the bulk of these numbers are from.
Correct.
Building and getting the pipes in, not really the pumping of the water or the water.
Right, the capital project is the biggest cost.
Councilmember Hall.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was, again, enlightening, and the summary was helpful. Just a quick question. So you've had this stakeholder meeting March 23rd?
Yes.
I think I wrote down. And I know that in Alternative 4, which is the most appealing one because of the price, you say here that if either Herrick Ranch or Silverado West were to decline, that Behringer would be, or could be, I guess I should say, could be connected. So have we handicapped? Do we know what the likelihood of them wanting to decline is? Has anyone evaluated that with these stakeholders to determine whether we're moving up a direction where we're going to have to contingency plan before we get started, or is that a...
Defer that to...
Well, in the resolution, we're asking for authority for the town manager to begin negotiations with these stakeholders, recycled water customers and users. So we've had preliminary discussions, but essentially based on direction from you tonight on our proposal for the rates, then we would then start discussing a standardized agreement with the recycled water customers and these rates, and essentially bring on new customers and if they're interested. And I think the direction from council in the past meeting was, unless they want to connect and they agree to connect, we don't want to go just build a pipeline without an agreement.
Precisely, except that we have a mandate that we're going to be required to do something.
Right.
So my follow-on question to that, and I don't know which one of you is more appropriate to ask, so we go from 1.4 million to 2.7 million, and I'm $500,000 away from actually adding, I forget how many it goes to in the first alternative, but it's a $500,000 difference. Still within our wastewater structure, is that the contingency plan that we're building here, or is that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And the short answer also, to make sure the council, all of these potential partners have been identified. For example, they know about what we're studying. They have agreed to participate, allowed our planning consultants and engineers onto the property. So there's a level of interest. And with the direction tonight, we will take that to the next level, which is actually trying to secure them into an agreement. And without that agreement, we obviously don't go build the project.
Right.
Any other questions about the staff report? No? Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
I invite members of the public to comment or ask questions at this time, if interested. And if not interested, we'll just keep on going. Okay, we'll keep on going. Bring it back to council for further discussion or potential action as it's presented tonight. Additional comments? I know there's already been some general discussion. So anyone in particular like to give further comments? Councilmember Hall?
I'd put forward a motion if there is no further comment.
Well, if you have a motion and there's a second, then there's still the potential for
Very good.
discussion or action.
Then I'd like to move to adopt Resolution 3020-12, accepting Bartle Wells Associates Recycle Water Rate Study 2012 and authorizing the town manager to negotiate agreements with existing and potential recycled water customers, users for the state-mandated Recycled Water Expansion Project, WW-0002, and authorize the expenditure of wastewater enterprise funds for the capital construction costs of the project.
Second.
Any further discussion? No? All in favor?
Aye.
No opposition. Thank you. That passes. Thanks very much for the ongoing information gathering and presenting. Thank you, Graham, also.
Thank you.
And good luck with those conversations. I do just want to say on behalf of the council, we appreciate our existing customers being as not only loyal to the process, but also flexible and willing to negotiate with our potential new customers. So let's keep that goodwill and good neighbor policy in places as we move forward as well. Thank you. Next up, our 43rd budget workshop. You call it whatever you want, but we've had many of these before.
You've had many discussions that help shape
Item
the
10C, budget workshop, introducing an overview of proposal of 2012-13 town budget.
Thank you, Mayor Council.
And actually, before we get into that, I do just want to recognize that there was a replacement, a revised staff report provided to the council, to the public, and so that's what we're talking about.
Yes, thank you,
Great.
Mayor.
You are looking at 10C revised.
Thank you.
On behalf of your management team, we're very pleased this year to be at this stage where we're able to present to you a proposed general fund operating budget with a very slight but positive fund balance of $2,540. I share this because I think it's noteworthy, one, to remember that in our previous discussions, you provided a lot of parameters and ideas about what you wanted to see in the budget and how the budget should be shaped. And I'm very excited to share with you that those are all incorporated, and we'll talk a little bit more in a PowerPoint presentation shortly. More importantly, I do want to remember that we started last year's process in a very different situation with some financial uncertainty, and we actually had a $160,000 structural deficit, if you remember. So as we move forward, one, I'm very appreciative of the council's policy direction that's been clear, and you've given us some guidance, and you're going to see a number of those guidance and requests on the part of the council built into what I believe is a very sound budget. There'll be a few areas for you to chew on, and I'm now stalling, which I normally would not do, and keep going while they try to get the technology ready so that we can move forward with a PowerPoint. But I do want to point out, and the finance director, Kathleen Bradbury, will go into more detail, but I do think it's important to share that, one, our general fund emergency reserve is increased to $1,250,000 to fully meet the council target of 20% of our annual expenditures. The revenue stabilization reserve is increased to $480,000 to meet the 10% of TOT target. Our claim retention reserve is returned to $50,000. We have a $250,000 contingency for potential legal expenses and another $100,000 annual general fund contingency. And you've also asked us to increase and be more aggressive with internal transfer funding for capital projects and an increase in our OPEB rate, all of which are incorporated in the proposed budget with a small but albeit positive fund balance. So with that, I will turn it over to Finance Director Kathleen Bradbury, and we will walk you through a little bit of the revenue and general fund expenditures. And I do want to remind you this is a little bit of an overview, and then next week we will go into departmental budgets on the 8th and again on the 23rd in detail.
I see Councilmember Hall has his calculator out, so we're ready to go.
Don't worry, I took out the batteries.
Thank you for that.
I'll give them back on the 8th.
So thank you for that, Steve. So we're going to walk through our budget development process, our budget parameters and assumptions, our general fund summary, our general fund revenue in some detail, an overview of our expenditures. Like the town manager said, we'll go into those in more detail when we do departmental review at our workshop, our next workshop. Our general fund estimates for 11-12, and then we'll wrap it up with feedback and questions. So our budget process, which is pretty much following the same as last year. I think we're a little ahead of schedule, which is good. In March, we begin our planning and discussion. In April, we bring our key budget parameters and assumptions to council for input, and we did that on April 3rd this year. And in May, we conduct a series of budget workshops, and we review our proposed budget in some detail. And then we're on schedule in June to adopt the budget, and we tentatively have that for June 5th. However, if we need the meeting on June 5th to still do discussion, we'll adopt our budget on June 19th, and then we'll be happy to print and publish our budget in time for the end of the fiscal year. So just a quick summary of our budget parameters and key assumptions, and these are just some key ones that we did review when we brought this to you in April, that we do want to produce a balanced budget and keep our expenditures within our projected revenue or other available funding sources. We want to maintain our core services at the same level. No new services, initiatives, or programs will be added unless we have an identified and secured funding source. And we want to evaluate town programs and review our cost recovery where applicable. And I will go through these fund reserves, and we'll look at them later in a chart. But we did increase our committed for emergencies to 20%. It might be a little rounding if you're using your calculator, but to $1,250,000 based on our proposed budget. And are committed for claims retention to $50,000. $30,000 is our requirement by our insurance provider. We have a sign for revenue stabilization funded at 10% of TOT, which was our target, $480,000. And additional reserves, as town manager said, assigned for contingencies, $100,000, and an additional assigned for legal contingencies of $250,000. This chart shows a summary. It's consolidated of what is in your staff report, and it's showing our total revenues of $7,498,875, expenditures at $6,276,446. So that leaves revenues less expenditures before transfers of $1,222,000. And then we have our allocated OPEB, and that since that's included in our expenditure count, it's shown here as monies coming in for OPEB. We have $8,000 for our TBID administration. We're transferring the remaining balance of our Fire Emergency Services Fund of $8,345. We're allowed to use that for part of our fire services contract that's related to the equipment replacement. We have a transfer for our capital projects fund of $660,000, so that's a nice deposit for future capital projects. And we have our debt service transfer for our lease revenue bond payment on our community center of $668,650. So those total to the $1,155,000, and that leaves us an excess of $67,404. Looking at revenue, where does the money come from? This is just a snapshot of the general fund revenue summary by major category. And we'll go through and take a little closer look at how we derive these numbers. Here's our chart that shows the different categories of revenue and the percentages. And I don't think it's any surprise to any of us that we still have the same top three revenue sources. We have our TOT at 64%, and we have both sales tax and property tax at 12%. So together, those make up 88% of our general fund revenue total. And then we have the other little pieces of the pie that add up to the 12%. So going through our primary revenue sources and how we get to these numbers, we do spend a lot of time looking at where we're at and what our trends have been, and we've kind of adopted our new 3-year trending. But TOT was adjusted mid-year. Last year we initially budgeted $3.8 million. We were very conservative, some would say too conservative, but we just weren't sure what growth we could expect with the new rooms that were coming online, and we just were really uncertain about the economy. At mid-year, we adjusted that estimate to $4,650,000, which is still very conservative, and we're currently expecting to end this fiscal year at $4.8 million, and that's what we're using for our projection next year. Our sales tax has also been a growing area of revenue, and originally for this year, we budgeted $795,000, which was very conservative. At mid-year, we adjusted that to $895,000. Being more realistic and seeing the trending that we were getting from our consultant on sales tax reporting. And we're proposing an amount of $915,000, which would be a modest but a $20,000 increase for sales tax. And we think that's a very reasonable projection. And property tax, we're basically budgeting flat. We don't have any updated information at this time from the county, other than that we probably can expect the 2% CPI factor on property tax assessments. But we're budgeting flat for that at $925,000. So we're going to go through and look at these in a little more depth. And here's how they look at a 4-year trend, including what the budget would be for 12-13. You can see we've had growth. Even the property tax and sales tax are small compared to our TOT. But you can see the growth over the last couple of years. So we spend a lot of time analyzing our TOT trends. And so we'll start just looking at our history through our last year's actual final audited number. And you can see how we've grown steadily since 2002-03. It's just been a steady climb. We did have a small dip in 2008-09. Our dip was less than it would have been because we had new rooms that came online that year with Bardesano and later Hotel Luca, which is now North Block. And we've just jumped up this last year quite a bit. And as we look, I know you've seen this graph before. This is our cumulative 3-year trend for the last 3 years. And we don't have March in quite yet. Probably have numbers in the next day or two for March. But you can see we've had just a steady growth over the last 2 years.
If I could, I just want to share one thing that while we're very excited about these trend lines, we've often talked a little bit in our long-range financial planning about the fact that we will max out and we will plateau. I have good news for you. We're reaching that point sooner rather than later. And I share that only in the sense that Kathleen and I are both very concerned that while we have some positive trending in numbers, our ability to generate more revenue from hotels is about tapped out. I mean, we can see some marginal improvements, but when you have the state's highest per capita room rate and occupancy reaching 80%, we need to start realizing that while this was projected, we're going to start maintaining and we're not going to see growth. It's going to be how do we maintain 5.2 in that range. Similarly to our sales tax, which Kathleen will also show, we're seeing an uptick, but at some point you can't sell more meals than we're already selling. And we don't have a very diversified sales tax base. So very good news in the sense that we're coming out of this ahead of many of our neighboring jurisdictions. But I do think, and we've talked about it before, but in our long-range financial, a budget of around 7 to 7.5 is probably what it's going to look like for the next several years.
So continuing with our TOT trend, here you can see the monthly. And this is really interesting because there has been growth each year. There was a little blip here in December. But you can see how it's definitely very seasonal. And we're probably, as town manager just stated, reaching our peak. It's also just interesting to note when you see it in this chart format that October is definitely one of our peak months, and this last October was record-setting at over $600,000 for 1 month. So what also drives, obviously, the revenue is occupancy. As they say in the industry, you have to have heads in beds to earn the revenue. So we also track our occupancy trends very closely. We have our reports on our website, but it's kind of interesting, I think, to see a chart and see how those trends go. And you can see that high occupancy is high 70s to a high of 84% last September, and our slow season ranges from 40s to high 50s. And we have had some growth in our slow season, probably attributable to efforts by TBID and other things that have come up in town, such as the film festival and things like that, that add to people being interested in coming here during the off-season. And last but not least, room rate. And we have seen tremendous growth in room rate with the addition of high-end rooms and rooms being upgraded and commanding more money. What we are seeing is that the average room rates have gone from highs in the mid-300s to a high last October of $439, which was also record-setting. And during the off-peak times, average room rates are right around the $260 range. And while growth has been strong in the last few years, as the town manager alluded to, we know we're starting to reach our plateau. We have a little bit of room left, but not much. We know we won't be adding new rooms anytime soon, So sales tax is our next big revenue source, and I know you're just wondering, where does it come from? Well, our top 25 sales tax generating businesses include 13 restaurants and food sales, 6 that are in the business of wine sales, 5 retail business, and 1 service station. And the top 25 businesses generate over 90% of the town's sales tax. So these trends are also very positive. We've seen growth looking at the quarter ending March 2011 compared to the quarter just ending March 2012. We saw $105,000 growth, or 16.8%. And then just looking at last quarter to this quarter, we gained 10%. And our largest gains were restaurants, our favorite, and service station. And this is how that translates on our revenue history. You can see we had some significant growth, and now we're starting to reach somewhat of a peak. As town manager said, the future growth will probably be primarily driven by inflation. And we'll look at property tax, and the driver of property tax is, of course, our assessed values, and we've been very fortunate over the years. This goes back to year 2000. We've seen a lot of growth in our assessed value. We had a couple of years where we had double-digit percentage increases, and even our slower years produced growth that was not negative, 2%, while just under 1% when other communities were seeing decreases. So that's been very positive for us. And this last year, we had a 5.94% increase. We're just not sure what we will see from John Tudor's office, but we're hoping to have some growth. We don't expect it to go backwards by any means, but we are budgeting our property tax pretty much flat at $925,000. We did have in 10-11 some one-time excess ERAF funding, but we are not including any of that in the budget, and anything we get for this year or next year would be minimal compared to these numbers, which were like catch-up payments for us. So there are some other revenue sources. This is what makes up the other 12%. We have other taxes, which includes our franchise fees, which come from PG&E and Comcast, our PEG fees and transfer tax funds that come through the county. We did include our $100,000 COPS grant, and we have definitely our fingers crossed that funding is currently provided in the governor's proposed budget, and we'll track that and make sure we're on target to get those funds. We have licenses and permits at $34,500. That assumes a slight increase in building permits due to some projects that are coming up in 12-13, and a slight decrease going forward as we know the town's reaching build out. This category also includes business license and some other special event and encroachment permit revenue. We have rental of government buildings, and that's the post office, and we do have a 7% increase. That's per the terms of our lease this year, so that's going up to $136,425. We have community hall and community center rental projections from Parks and Rec, and those are at $55,000 and $17,000. And then the other facility rental charges where the renters pay for the facility attendance and special event insurance, and we're projecting an increase of $5,000 in that. And here's the Parks and Rec fees, just a little snapshot, and we're projecting an increase of about $5,000, and that $25,000, I'm sorry, and that's for the addition of a new after-school homework program and some expanded sports programs. And we'll talk more about that when we go through the Parks and Rec budget on the 8th. So if we look at the expenditure side of things, our salary and benefit assumptions, we're maintaining our current staffing levels of 24 FTE. We're assuming all full-time employees have opted in for the benefits for which they're eligible. We have some step increases for eligible employees, and we assumed no COLA for 12-13. We have our PERS employer rate, which is increasing from 18.534% to 19.599%. That's a cost increase of $39,000. We assume the town will no longer pay the 8% PERS employee rate with an offsetting adjustment to employee salaries. We assume 10% increase for health premiums. That's about a $34,000 cost. We assumed 5% increase for our other benefit costs, dental, life, and disability premiums. That's about a $6,000 cost. We're implementing our 8% OPEB funding rate up from 7% in 2011-12 per our current policy, and that will pay the current year retiree health benefit premiums of $105,000 and contribute approximately $53,000 to our OPEB trust fund. And the part-time staff hours that were budgeted were estimated by departments, and we'll see those as we go through the department budgets. Moving along on operating expenses, we've included, these are just highlighting some things that I want to make sure the council's aware as we go through more details later in the budget. We've included $8,000 for Community Cleanup Day as part of our community promotions budget. We do have $22,000 provision for funding additional library hours should the council choose to do so. That's in our non-departmental budget. We have $18,000 for the paperless agenda implementation. That's in our IT budget. We have $40,000 to continue our electronic document management system implementation in the town clerk budget. We've included our $25,000 designated contingency appropriation in the non-departmental budget. We have our $13,000 animal shelter contract. This is year 3 of that phased-in cost, and that's in our non-departmental budget. Our town attorney budget includes $350,000 for litigation services and support. We have $859,000 for our law enforcement services contract. That's a 3% increase per the sheriff's contract, so that's an additional cost of almost $24,000. And we budgeted $472,000 for a fire and emergency services contract. And at the time we were building these numbers, we assumed a $16,500 increase to that contract. The final amount is slightly more, but I think the budget that we have will be adequate. And we are also getting a one-time credit this year on the fire contract of $189,000. So that's helping us. We'll see that when we get to our projections for the end of this year. So here's a snapshot of this year's budget compared to the proposed budget, and you can see the increases, decreases, and the percentage change, which has actually gone down. And one area of decrease that should be noted is the OPEB, because we took made additional appropriations and contributed additional funding this year to OPEB. That is one of the things that's contributing to the overall decrease, because this just includes our initial 8% allocation. And here's the pie chart and how it divvies up. And it's pretty similar to last year, with public safety at 21%, Parks and Rec at 20%, Public Works at 19%, And then we have planning and building at 8, and we just come around all the other little pieces of the pie. And here's a graph that shows the 4-year trend by function and how it breaks out. And here is our general fund summary, and this is a consolidated fund balance statement. And what we're seeing here is this is what's currently in our budget for the current year, 2011-12, and here's what we're estimating at the end of the year. So at the end of the year, we're projecting that we will have an unassigned fund balance of $368,636, or close to it. And what we're asking the council to consider and for allocation of those funds would be the following: transfer to capital projects of $100,000, additional allocation of $68,000 to the OPEB trust, an additional allocation of $100,000 for contingency, and an additional $100,000 for legal contingency. And we would make those entries as part of closing out the fiscal year. And if we do that, our estimated fund balance at June 30, 12, with these allocations and based on our budget projections, we would have this $2,000 of PEG that we're still kind of paying back for the project we did. We have $1,145,000 in our emergency reserve. We have $35,000 in our claims retention, $225,000 in our contingency reserve, $400,000 in our revenue stabilization, and $23,000 in our Assigned for Arts program based on the funds that they raise and spend for their projects, and $100,000 for legal contingency. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions, take comments, feedback.
Great, thank you very much. Very thorough introduction to our formal budget workshops coming up. Specific questions, are there any questions? Councilmember Hall, I'm sure you have a question.
I have just a couple real straightforward ones, actually. So thank you. Very helpful. I noticed, in looking at the numbers and just in general, I mean, this is like the first full year, or maybe the second full budget that you've been able to use Springbrook. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you feel like you're getting adequate information, and you're being able to trend and look at budgeting and measuring actual versus budget and all of that very effectively.
Yes.
Okay, because that just leads me to my next question, which is more specifically with regards to the Parks and Rec split. I noticed the one line went to 0, but then several other lines got broken into values. Is that because you're more capable of tracking those?
Yes.
And I'll point you specifically to that if I can find it.
Yes.
You found it. There it is.
Yes.
So what you've done is you've taken your 63.
What we used to do is we used to have this 35 recreation fees?
Yes.
We used to put everything in there.
Got it. And now you're
And then
calling it
Samantha
payout.
came along and said, that's just not working for me. So we broke it out. Class fees, events fees, sports programs. So it's very specific now. I think we always had the swimming pool broken out, but everything else was lumped into this 35. So that's why, I can't go back and change the history, but that's why you see 0 there and all these broken out.
That's great. That was my assumption,
Yes.
but I just wanted to verify
it's good to
that.
clarify.
One last question. You made a comment, I believe, that there's a credit of $189,000 for fire and emergency services.
It's also, it's actually 198,000, and we were inadvertently not charged accurately by our friends in the county of Napa, and during our negotiations with fire, it was disclosed and discovered when we were reviewing certain things. So if you may recall, our contracts have a maximum contract amount, and part of that, because it's a carry-through contract with the state, with CAL FIRE, it depends on what actual personnel costs were. And somehow the the very efficient billing office just decided to process invoices for maximum amount.
But just to reiterate, let's just call it 200,000 for round numbers' sake. Your expense budget is taking a benefit of $200,000 due to a one-time overpayment that we're now recovering. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's correct. And that's why we're making sure that you're aware of that. I would also say
We
when
assume
you,
it's a one-time.
I'm going to hope it's a one-time. But I also think it's important while you're looking at that, that we still ended the year in a very disciplined area, with one exception, well within budget maintenance. And I think, to our credit now, for the last several years, we've managed expenses, which does mean when we have a revenue situation that's positive, like we've had last year, we're able to bank that. And I think, you asked us to be a little less conservative in some of our revenue projections, and we pleaded with you that if you provide a little bit of a revenue stabilization fund, that we would be a little more willing, and I think we've hopefully met your goals there. I think it's still conservative, but I think it's a realistic revenue stream based on what we know, and not one that's, because the good news is, if we do have a little bit of unassigned fund balance at the end of this year, which is probably likely, the end of the proposed year, then you get to have the pleasure of putting it into OPEB or capital projects or something like that at your discretion. But we're going to get down to a small number, not large numbers. And again, as you know, you've asked us at the staff level to really focus on long-range planning for our infrastructure, and that means that we've got to start banking some money, because some of those projects are, they're in the millions, which means we've got to develop a funding source in the millions.
And because this is more of a casual workshop, I'll invite comments as well as questions at this point, since we're really just trying to get some feedback to staff. Yes, Councilmember Mueller.
Since I'm invited to comment, I'd like to choose to comment on the library. There is a $22,000 placeholder, which would cover 2 additional library hours. The Ad hoc Library Committee, which is Council Member Dornbecker and myself, have been working quite a bit. We are implementing what we call the Hall Plan, which is to hopefully have 100 volunteers over a period of time. We're almost at 1/10 of that, which, we're just getting going, so that's pretty good. I think we're going to get there. So the idea would be that if we really have all these volunteers, that ultimately we might be able to get to 40 hours a week, but we'll probably need, from our 17 and a half, which is a very aggressive goal, but we still have that goal. So if we have the $22,000 earmarked, and everything works out, it would be probably much later in the year, perhaps we could put some of that money or all of that money into additional library hours and supplement it with significant volunteer time to have this potential 40-hour-a-week plan. So it's in here as a placeholder. We're not asking you to spend it right now. We've got quite a bit more work to do, getting more volunteers, working with the county, et cetera. So Councilmember Dornbecker might want to add to that, but that's why that's in there as a placeholder right now.
Well, I'll actually add to that from discussions with supervisors, that I think one of the frustrations we've had is to pay into what we think is an inappropriate, inefficient system, which is why it's $22,000 for 2 hours. But we're looking at trying to get changes to that system, so hopefully we won't need to even get there. It's far from anything that you guys have already done, and you need to continue doing what you're doing. But there's at least the issues on the radar at the supervisor level, which I don't think it has been in the past. So I think by watching our subcommittee working proactively is helping get that on that radar. And also as we're finding alternative solutions that it's getting, I think, a little harder for some folks to say no to making some changes. So hopefully that'll be the case.
Hopefully that will be the case.
Other comments about other issues? Any other feedback for staff? Or do you want to save it for the 8th? Councilmember Dornbecker, any? Okay.
I went through this, with my yellow marker.
Save your highlighted pages. Vice Mayor?
There's too much.
First of all, welcome. You,
Thank you. I circled, showed it to the vice mayor, or the mayor, I'm sorry, the $7.5 million proposed revenues for this year, and I said, if you had told me 4 years ago we would have that number, I would never, ever have believed you. So we're in a very fortunate situation. We discussed last time, and I wanted to just get clarification on the Yountville trolley, and I know you had that as one of your bullet points. Has there been any, I assume that's not in here right now. Is there going to be any discussion with TBID?
Well, let me clarify. It is not, the base funding level to maintain the current level of service is in the budget.
Right.
Based on the lack of consensus direction, we don't. The TBID has not met and isn't scheduled to meet until May for a workshop, so it's too early to know what level of interest, if they will have. I do know that there has been some discussion with folks at the Veterans Home as to whether they might contribute some. There's also, I should point out, two levels of numbers. There's about $53,000 is the increased cost to do to bring service on Monday and Tuesday, including the 2-hour gap, and there's a $70,000 cost if you don't want a 2-hour service gap. And part of that is because we've already deployed the base contract amount already. So, and when we start adding more hours, it comes out of more of what's known as the fare box share. And as you know, we pick up all of the fare box so that there is no charge to any of our riders. That's not the case in all of our other jurisdictions. And in fact, American Canyon, Calistoga, St. Helena, if you ride the local transit options there is a charge. But that's been our decision, and I think I'm also very excited to share with you that we've been doing some really good tracking, and we're going, we hit just under 22,000 riders last year. And I want to remember when we had the old, very inefficient service when we just ran 9 to 4, Monday through Friday, or 10 to 4, whatever I was thinking, before we went into our we were averaging in the 8,000 range. So we have moved to 22, and we're actually on track to probably finish this fiscal year approaching 25,000. I will all share with you that Graham and I and Tom Roberts with NCTPA really believe we have increased capacity. We still think there is room to improve our own local ridership. We run into residents that still don't believe that the service is there, that it's free and that they can call. And we still, believe it or not, as much as, I've walked the streets, Graham's walked the street. I should clarify, we've walked the streets with brochures outlining how to use the transportation service, the free trolley, rack cards. We just have more growth. But the reality is, it is well used. There are times when it may not look like there's many folks on it, but it's also what we call, in the transit world, it's a deviated ridership, which means it's not moving on a fixed route. You call it, it will come work its way to pick you up and take you. It may stop and pick somebody else up along the way because it's not like a dedicated taxi. But if I have to say, it's been one of our success stories. But now if we want to take it to that next level, it does have a significant dollar cost that we need to develop, probably based on prior council feedback to staff, a partnership rather than the town just doing it ourselves.
Well, and I would argue that it's the vehicle, not the hours of operation, that made the significant difference. It's a combination of the two, I think.
Yeah.
But there's no question that the change in vehicle made it significantly more inviting.
I'm not going to disagree with that, Mayor, but I think also, when you only had it from 10 to 4, locals really had no reason to use it. It couldn't take you to dinner and back. Right. So I'm saying, I think the two together we now have something that I think is working, and we can tweak it and expand it and try to work on it. But, that's the qualitative decision.
So what I guess the request being that it is May now, and we have many more of these meetings to go, is TBID discusses that this month, just kind of a report back and the Veterans Home as well. And I think a partnership scenario is something that's more palatable, then that's a fairly major expense. And once you add something, it's hard to take it away.
Correct.
And that meeting is on the 9th. The
very soon.
PID meeting is on the 9th.
I'll just add in that vein, because I've spoken with Mr. Roberts myself also about this subject, and I don't know that it cannot be announced, but there is a brand-new trolley going to be delivered to the town by June. And he's very excited. Our ridership quadrupled, and I asked him to please give me, did he have numbers? Could he show me when? And he's starting to provide numbers to us to look at the ridership. And so I think some combination with T-bid to cover some of the costs of the late hours would help us to, raise enough to add because having the shuttle not run between 2 and 4 each day is a concern. I know a lot of people in town have talked to me about that. So I also agree that a partnership is what we're looking to. And Mr. Roberts actually did say that there may be a few more dollars available from NCTPA as well. So I think that working all together, there is where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, the NCTPA board approved that shuttle. Actually, it's been several months. I think. They warned us it would take a while for the actual vehicle to arrive. But great. Any other comments, Councilmember Mueller?
On the townwide cleanup day, I don't believe the Upper Valley Waste Management isn't going to meet until May 22nd. But there are some early numbers, and there is significant interest in town to contribute, in a ratepayer situation to that service. I think everyone really needs to remember that this is the first time the town has actually put money in the budget for the townwide cleanup day. It's occurred every year, but it's always been funded by a grant from Upper Waste Management. So each one of the towns is still going through looking at surcharges for their own particular use. So that's how the funding could be considered on a more permanent sourcing base, is as a surcharge on each one of the ratepayers' bill. And that way, too, we're always talking about Prop 26 within the Upper Waste Management Board, because to give something away to somebody who isn't one of the ratepayers is really not allowed anymore by Prop 26. So this way, you really don't ever have that issue coming up. The ratepayers pay the surcharge for the cleanup day, and the maximum, I think, was only 50 cents a month. So everybody looked at those numbers and felt it was pretty reasonable. So I think that's what our date is going to show, and something similar will probably be done in Calistoga for hazardous household waste, and St. Helena, something like that. So everyone's going to use that. Potentially, depends on how the board votes, that potential surcharge that'll be added when we do our rate adjustment July 1 for these types of events that are unique to our community. So it isn't here, again, as a placeholder, but I think that's something we'll have to have. I'll try to bring as much information as I can before we finalize the budget, but that should be something that we consider. We'll always, I think we've heard from our citizens, we want to continue that, but the funding source is what we'll have to make decisions about.
So, clarifying, who is saying that they support a surcharge? The board feels that the municipalities support a surcharge, or have they actually collected data from ratepayers?
Remember your last trash bill? There was a card in there with a stamp on it, and it said if you were a Yountville resident to jump to question number 6, because the other questions had to do with the hazardous household waste, which was in the interest of the other communities in our JPA.
So they have collected that and analyzed that data.
It was all due in about a week ago. It's being in the process of counting it all up, but there was great feedback and return in general. I haven't really had any hard and fast numbers. I know I sent my card in. I hope everyone else did too, expressing their opinion. So as we discuss that, just so that all of our citizens really know that this is the first time we're actually putting a full year as a placeholder budget in, but that may be taken care of with another permanent funding source.
Okay. Is there any other feedback for staff, or are we good for right now?
And the last thing?
Yes, we have big binders ready to put more
The
stuff
binders are the materials for the May 8th budget workshop, yes.
Oh, thank you.
in. We're not going to go over this right now.
No, that's on the 8th.
Oh, just this one small binder.
At 1:30, and the town clerk will be posting that information online, and there'll be public notice for a public meeting.
I did want to invite any public comment, if you'd like to share, or if you'd like to wait until we actually are breaking down into the details of the budget on the 8th, that's fine too. But feel free to come on up now if you have any thoughts about the presentation.
I'm just really encouraged about the trolley figures and the possibility that I hear rumbling around that you may be able to find a way of making that a full service. I would like to members at the home, I know are anxious to see that occur, and we'd like to sort of make that known in a way that is supportive to the budget process. When would be the best time to do that, on the 8th or
That's
the second meeting?
first of
or-
our formal budget sessions is the 8th, and the 22nd?
23rd.
23rd is the
Starts at
second one?
1:30.
Do we know which of those dates will be
On
covering
May
that?
8th.
May 8th is the date that we'll be discussing that particular part of the budget.
Okay.
So any feedback that can be sent to us prior to that, or if there are members that would like to participate in the budget session itself.
Okay, thank you
And
very
the
much.
time again, it starts at 1:30?
1:30.
1:32,
In the
question
council
mark.
chambers.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Speak for yourself.
Thank you. We think till 5, 1:30 to 5.
That's true.
Okay. Thank you for that great preview workshop. Moving on to staff information reports, we have an update on our electronic records management system.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is just an informational update, and it is letting the council know where staff is at on the implementation of the electronic records management system. And I'll just do some bullet highlights. It talks about council making this one of its priorities in its strategic plan, and then adopting a budget so that we could proceed with implementation, research and implementation of the first phase. And I've talked about what we've done internally to kick off our record scanning project, and we've provided minutes, resolutions, and ordinances since the town's incorporation to SciTech for scanning, and so far to date, they've scanned in for minutes 1,448 sets of minutes, 3,027 resolutions, and 412 ordinances. And we're continuing on with Phase 1, which includes a few other items, most notably council packets, which that's going to be the most labor-intensive in terms of setting that up and getting that record prepared, indexed so that SciTech can scan and properly upload that information. And then, as Kathleen noted earlier, we are proposing in next year's budget additional funds to continue with Phase 2 of the project. And that departments are to be determined who's going to go next and how we're going to work on that. And just thanks to council for supporting technology and the town manager. It's going to be a great resource for us, and we've already gotten quite a bit of use out of what's in there internally. And we're just waiting for SciTech to get the OCR search capability activated, and then also our public portal portion.
Great, thank you. Any comments, feedback from Councilmember Hall?
Yeah, please, thank you. Michelle, just a quick question on the records, so the minutes, resolutions, ordinances that have been scanned already. First in, or was it last in? So what's gone, from recent backwards or from backwards forwards?
Backwards, forward, and from the point that I sent them, probably the last 3 council meetings aren't in the system.
Oh,
but
really?
since incorporation to present are complete.
Wow.
Yes, it's very amazing and exciting. It really is.
That's great.
And really, I just attached some screenshots so you can get an idea of what the system looked like when you're searching. And once we go through and, quality control check and make a few tweaks, we'll start rolling that out.
That's great.
Well, I think we're really seeing the advantages of getting modernized and taking advantage of technology. We talked about it with the budget, and it really gets back to information availability and transparency and efficiency and all those things, so that'll be great.
I do have a
Any other
question,
feedback?
please.
Councilmember Dornbecker?
I am very impressed, and this is definitely, we need to advance our IT tech, abilities and record keeping. But I'm concerned, I want to know, what is the plan for dealing with historic documents after
After
they've been scanned in? We are going to keep those, though.
we, at the present time, our records retention schedule keeps ordinances, minutes, resolution as a permanent document. We do have some historical files we are going to keep and scan, but I think this will be a natural process of determining we're going to update the retention schedule. With one project comes another, and so we will probably revisit that retention schedule to determine what we want to keep, what we don't want to keep, and I think in getting responses from listservs, you generally do keep the resolutions, ordinances, and minutes of town council meetings. Maybe there's some opportunity to actually destroy council packets if that seems to be a trend or an interest. Probably have about, 38 to 40 bankers boxes of council packets from the most, as far back as we can go, the 80s of when council packets were actually done. So.
And are they one each of a sample of that particular night, or the whole?
It's a packet. It's going to be like
One single.
one single
One
packet.
complete set.
Right, for each
Well,
meeting date.
I just want to have a presence in our mind of the fact that in 2015, it's going to be our 50th anniversary.
Okay.
And so some of those historical archives might be of interest for that event and beyond. But anyway, I just want that to be, keep that in our minds too, okay?
We will add a section that will have historical documents. We'll talk about incorporations and some of the milestones that we've had, and probably consider that a document type within the records retention program or in the SciTech search feature.
Good, thanks.
Ironically, by 2015, we may be completely paperless and have no more documents. We'll see about that.
We can have a bonfire.
That's what I said.
Still have archives, though, and that's the point.
What?
right?
Electronic
No
archives.
bonfire?
Arnold, you're saying no.
Anyway, we're going to refocus on to, thank you very much for that update. Moving on to item 12, council meeting reports. I'm ignoring all of you right now. Council meeting reports, I'll start with Napa Valley Flood Control and Water Conservation District. Interesting meeting today, which involved the single largest budget adjustment that I've ever been a part of, $11.472 million.
Write that one down.
Was, I'll call it adjusted, but basically what happened was the Army Corps of Engineers changed what was being, the interpretation of what was being paid for by federal dollars and what was being paid for by district dollars. And there were 90% of the $11.5 million was specifically connected to the rail bridge. Mostly the approaches to the bridge, the fact that it was elevated, being reconstructed, and there were some other local expenses as well. But there's been a reinterpretation of the contract, and the board approved the $11.4 million payment to technically to the state, but it's the state representation of the federal Corps, reserving the right to dispute who actually is required to pay that money in the future. But this was primarily to avoid a stoppage of the construction on the flood control project, which was in serious jeopardy. So that was not a normal line item today, but we received significant support from Senator Feinstein, Congressman Thompson. Both wrote very strong letters of support to the Army Corps to not stop the project, and basically said that let's figure this out moving forward, but to not interrupt the progress that's being made. So that was kind of a high or low light of the flood control meeting today. Napa County Transportation and Planning Agency meeting, Vice Mayor and I attended. There was the official approval of the sale of our park and ride lot You were not there. You would have been there. Actually, Councilmember Mueller was there. I knew we had a second voice. But there was approval of the park and ride lot over at Solano and California, near the entrance to the California Veterans Home. And also, we approved the budget, if I remember. Councilmember Mueller.
Yeah, we also, I thought, a very significant proposal that we saw that will very likely be implemented was total rearrangement of the Vine bus system routes.
Oh, yes.
It's going to be a major change, especially in Napa, but what's going to affect us on Highway 29 is they're going to split the Route 10 into two routes, because the biggest problem right now, the bus starts in Calistoga, and there is a problem in place along the route, and you're waiting in Vallejo, you're going to have a big delay, and vice versa. So having the 10 split into two routes, I think, is going to be very, very beneficial. And to the trolley point too, the Vine will be. It runs every day from the Vets Home down to Washington and Mulberry. So, and it runs hourly down the hill and up the hill. So there is a bus coverage in case people don't really know that and they think without the trolley there isn't a way to get up and down the hill. It's only 75 cents. So, and then the original bus routes, they really took a hard look at those in Napa, and they found that they were trying to run the bus as far as possible for the most least amount of dollars spent, and they really found that, yeah, they weren't spending a lot of money, but nobody was riding the bus. So now they're really following the bus routes by ridership. So I thought that was a very significant change that's going to make, I think it's going to work pretty well.
Yeah, they're also looking, in addition to that, it was a good point, they're integrating the whole transit center as a point to time buses, to time transfers, to really make it more efficient. The point was being made that the polling has said many more people are interested in riding, but they're not willing to take an hour to get across town or 2 hours to get up Valley. So those things hopefully are going to be moving forward very soon. Yes, Councilmember Hall.
So you say the park and ride lot was purchased by whom?
The NCTPA,
From Yountville?
the town of Yountville.
So we received a check?
I haven't yet.
Do we know how much it's
I
going to
have
be?
no check.
$150,000.
That number I didn't hear. Okay, thank you.
But I actually just signed the sales and transaction agreement, so.
Thank you.
So it's the dirt, basically unused gravel dirt lot that,
Great.
yes.
Let you know when we get a check.
It's just the 150 I was interested in.
We might spend it.
We'll talk about that on the 8th.
Right.
Let's see, were there other meeting reports to be had?
Actually, did you sign those?
No, specifically, the next one on here is the League of California Cities North Bay Division meeting. Any comments about that meeting?
Well,
Councilmember Dornbecker?
Yes, Councilmember Moeller and the mayor and I attended that meeting, and it was in Healdsburg in the Villa Park, which was such a lovely place. And I thought it was pretty well attended, and it was well moderated by our mayor.
And you're forgetting our transportation provided by town manager.
I beg your pardon.
Steve Rogers.
We did carpool with
We're trying
town
to
manager.
be, trying to lower our
That's
footprint.
because I could not find public transportation to get us to Healdsburg.
Well, it takes 8 hours.
We did have a presentation on redevelopment and economic development tools and the status of that in Sacramento, so that was informative. Let's see, any other, let's go to comments. Do we have any other specific comments? Vice Mayor?
One comment is a week from this Saturday, May the 12th, at 6 p.m. at the Yountville Community Center is the annual Yountville Little League fundraiser. There will be a dinner by Bob Hurley and Victor Scargill, the chef at Lucy at Bartisono. And tickets are $50 to support Little League here in Yountville. So if you need to get tickets, you can get them at the Chamber of Commerce. Cindy Sosserman has them there.
And speaking of the Chamber of Commerce, I understand their remodel of their Welcome Center is almost complete, but certainly worth going and taking a look and seeing how they've really kind of transformed that space. So stop on in there. Any other comments? Yes, Councilmember Mueller.
Yes, next Saturday, the 12th, same day, before you go to the Little League dinner, that will be the Yountville's Townwide Garage Sale Day. And Councilmember Chilton made a very good suggestion on our Yountville Next Door Neighbor website that if you don't want to put your stuff out and manage your own garage sale, that donations to the Yountville Elementary School are being taken from the 7th to the 12th. So my box of stuff is getting ready to get over there. And then the Townwide Cleanup Day, we will announce that during our next council meeting.
It's the 19th.
It's the following Saturday.
Right. That'll be the following Saturday, but we can talk about that at our next council meeting on the 15th, so.
Thank you. We'll move on to future agenda items, if I could read them. Our budget work session, May 8th at 1:30, and on our May 15th, looking at wayfinding sign, Summerston Use Permit Amendment, and a Master Development Plan Amendment for Hotel Yountville. Closed session, item 14. Do we have reason for closed session tonight?
We do, Mr. Mayor and members of the Town Council. We have 3 items. 1, conference with the labor negotiator, the Yountville Employees Association, non-representative management employees, public employee performance evaluation, the town manager, and a brief item on conference with legal counsel, existing litigation in the town of Yountville versus Swank.
Do we have any anticipated action?
We do not.
Do we have any anticipated time of discussion, deliberation?
I would say 15 minutes.
15 to 20 minutes. Very good. Thank you very much. So with that, in case folks aren't going to stay tuned, our next meeting will be a special meeting for our budget work session on Tuesday, May 8th at 1:30, and our next regular town council meeting will be Tuesday, May 15th at 6 p.m. With that, we're going to go into closed session.